Hey guys, this is Frank Yecker, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
Hey, this is Rich Franklin.
What's up, everybody? This is Chris Lieben. This is Diego Sanchez. Randy Couture.
Alistair Overeem.
Hi, this is Stephen Bonner.
This is Don Fry.
Hey, I'm Phil, Mr. Wonderful Davis.
TJ Dillashaw.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Welcome to Submission Radio, episode 160. It's Wednesday, the 30th of May. I know I say this all the time, Cass, but it just keeps getting colder here in Melbourne. We're about 7 degrees. And, you know, to do the show, you got to look a certain way. You got to wear a certain T-shirt. You got to have a certain smile on your face. And it is very definitely cold here in Melbourne this morning.
Yeah, my girlfriend's mum, for some reason, bought me these socks, but they're kind of like shoe socks, where they've got little pads on the bottom, and they're furry. They're insane. It's like something you would take into like a forest, if you will, like going through the ice. So I'm wearing them right now. Feet are too low. I can't show you guys, but I can show you this. Got a new T-shirt. I ordered it specifically to wear on the show. Ned Flanders. It's being raised right now, and I'm trying to get it on the camera. It says, "She wants the diddly." Which, you know, Flanders is all about the sex pervert life. We'll know it. So yeah, there you go, Dennis. I know you're paying homage as well. You're wearing a sexy T-shirt, aren't you?
Yeah, I got a bit of a hot rod thing going here today. Of course, the ultimate heel, the ultimate bad guy. Who could forget WrestleMania 1 and the effect that had, I suppose, and a lot of guys like Chael Sonnen and a lot of the big names out there. I know he had a big effect, of course. Ronda Rousey taking his nickname, and then now she's in the WWE wearing his jacket, I believe. So
you've got the T-shirt, so you're probably around the corner from making your WWE debut.
Yeah, I've been pretty rowdy, but I've been trying to keep it off the record. Apparently, Submission Radio lawyers think we won't get any sponsorships if there's some negative stuff that comes out about me, but we don't get sponsorships anyway, so it doesn't even.
You can't lose that which you don't have already.
That's right.
So.
And speaking of socks, I mean, it's great that you got those nice socks. I've struggled finding nice warm socks for men. That's just the problem for me. You go in the shop, it's either these really thick, rugged socks that you could wear like on a mountain, or there's these really tiny, puny, disgusting little socks that you wear for business, or these like sports socks, which is like they're cut off at the ankle and they got created in the 80s and they're referred to as sports socks. So I've been buying female socks lately, guys. Here's an admission on Submission Radio. I've been going to Kmart and Target. I've been finding... so I've been trying to... Okay, so
Didn't I tell you about this? Because I was about to say that I do the same thing. $3, you get 3 no-show socks. Didn't I tell you about this? I think I told you about this.
No, you didn't tell me about it. But do you buy those really warm plush socks?
No, I don't go that far. Mine are white, plain, and you can't tell they're female socks. But they're cheaper. You know what? The same socks, the same size for men are $5. The same ones are $3 for women. Gender inequality at its most outrageous.
You'd be an idiot not to go over to the female section and buy some socks from there. But they got these nice warm plush socks. Sure, they have like kittens on them and stuff like that, but you can wear them around the house. They keep your feet warm. I've got one pair on right now, which is like the one that you have, but it's got like glitter on it. It's fantastic.
Oh, wow.
It's fantastic. I'm going to take one off. I'm just going to show it to the camera.
Oh, wow.
I don't care.
If you become a stripper, you can this will go with the outfit. Wow.
Have a look at that inside, of course. So warm. Look at that. It's just a lot of weird things to say before the show even starts today. It's some funny stories. First thing was, I had a weird dream about Brock Lesnar last night, Casper. There goes the camera a little bit. Had a little dream about Brock Lesnar last night.
It was like Smithers and Mr. Burns where he floated through the window.
No, that was the other week. No, imagine that. I don't usually have dreams, but my shoulder's been really messed up lately, so I've been taking a lot of Voltaren, Rapid 25, and Panadol before I go to sleep.
That's the good stuff.
Get through the pain. I'm a little bit like Mickey Rourke at the start of the wrestler when I get out of bed sometimes. Sometimes I struggle waking up as well. Anyway, so I've been having these dreams. Last night, I had a dream about Eminem. Don't really need to talk about that dream, but you and me basically met him, and you had a better interaction with Eminem than I did, and I got kind of jealous of you, and I'm like, why does Eminem like Casper more than me? It's just, and I think like he went to hug you, but he like grabbed you and like held you and like, yeah, man, like, anyway. And then he was just kind of no-sold me, so that's all right.
Wow. Was it because you saw Joseph Benavidez' new hairdo, and then you were thinking about Eminem?
I think so. So. I mean, yeah. I think it was Joseph Benavidez and the Voltaren Rapid 25. That could be like...
Lethal
combination. We don't have those
ads
here in Australia where it's like side effects of Voltaren Rapid and 25 may include Brock Lesnar and Eminem dreams.
Yeah.
Like, they don't have that on the commercial. But last night I had a weird dream. I think it was you, me, and a couple of other dudes. We were going to watch the Yankees play in the new Yankee Stadium. And we go up to the ticket booth, and who's there to sell us the tickets but Brock Lesnar? And Brock Lesnar goes to sell us these tickets, and they're like crap seats, and they're super expensive, but we're there. So they were $90 a seat, which I don't know. If you're from New York, let us know. That could actually be like a good price for a crappy ticket to watch the Yankees play. And then I was like, hey, you know, like, we've tried to get you on the show before. And he's like, oh, have you? And I'm like, yeah, like, we've tried to get you on through this way, that way. And he's like, oh, you know, he like hands over his phone. He's like, try me on this number and with this email. And I'm like, you know, like, maybe I could get you and Paul Heyman on. And he's like, yeah, that's all right. But then before we leave, and this is like, I'm not even making this up. He's like, hey man, can you tell me something? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, how come people dislike your show, Submission Radio, so much? And then I woke up. Can you believe it? That was the actual
Did you wake
dream.
up screaming?
I was like, damn it, Lesnar knows as well. But
Oh
that
my
was great.
God.
Well, when I woke up, I was actually like, I didn't care about the fact that he said no one likes Submission Radio. I cared about the fact that we were going to get Brock Lesnar and Paul Heyman on the show. Like, I woke up, like, I was ready to give you a call. Kind of like when you have one of those dreams where you make out with a nice-looking girl or something's about to happen.
You
And
fall
that
in
just
love. You're so happy, and then you wake
fall
up
in
and
love, you wake up,
Yeah.
and it's over, but you kind of think it was real.
and then you try and go back to sleep, and you're lying to yourself. You're like, it'll never happen.
Yeah, Brock Lesnar never came back when I tried to go to sleep. And when I woke up, I was like, oh, man, I'm going to call Casper. He won't believe that we're getting Brock Lesnar and Paul Heyman on the program next week. So that was the weird dream. So that was something happened there. But then also something interesting that's happened in the last few weeks that we haven't been able to talk to people about, Casper, is our Instagram account. We now have an Instagram account, and it came about in a sort of wacky and kooky way. Do you want to sort of tell people how it came together?
So someone DM'd us on Twitter. As you know, at Submission AUS, our DMs are open. Anyone can message us whenever they want. And somebody messaged us and was like, hey, you guys need to get an Instagram. Well, you guys should be on Instagram. And I ended up seeing it, so I responded. I was like, look, you know, we got Facebook, we got Twitter. That's enough social channels for us to sort of, you know, handle. Don't want to spread ourselves too thin. And then they sent a link back to Instagram.com/whatever. I think it was Submission AU or Submission AUS. And I was like, huh. I was like, that's interesting. I went on it. There's a bunch of posts, and it's pretty much a lot of the stuff that we put on Twitter. And I was like, maybe well, I know this is kind of your department, so I thought maybe Dennis just made an Instagram on the low and just didn't say anything to me. I was like, all right, cool, whatever, sweet. And then so I messaged you, and I'm like, hey, did you make an Instagram? And you're like, nah, it's fake. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting. So then I didn't want to respond to this person because I didn't want to be like, hey, it's fake, before I knew anything. And I was like, wow. So then you contacted the person. Turns out it was basically fan made. I know on Twitter it's the Mind of Ray Ray. I think it's at, I'll check right now. Give me 2 seconds. I think it's at Mind of Ray Ray. And basically this kind person created it for us, Ray Ray Rodriguez, at the Mind of Ray Ray. So shout out to him and a big thank you for making that. And basically they got back to you on Instagram where we're like, hey, I'm just a fan. It's just fan made and it's yours whenever you want it. So they were kind enough to surrender it. Didn't charge us $50,000, which I think is the norm for when you try and get an account or a website URL. Shout out to Mike Dyson for boxing. But yeah, so there we go. So now we're officially on Instagram.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's nice to be on Instagram. A big thank you to Ray Ray for doing that.
Thank you.
I think his background is actually in social media. He builds up a bunch of different accounts and stuff like that. So you guys can check him out on Twitter.
I thought it was
on
International
Instagram.
Assassin, but yeah.
International Assassin as well. I think you guys can contact him and maybe he can help you guys out with your social media. But nevertheless, Ray, thank you for that. We're on Instagram. You guys can follow us on Instagram now at Submission Radio. We put up things, and I think it should be fun having an Instagram because when we do cover events, maybe me and Casper can do like some Instagram videos and that kind of stuff.
Streaming,
so,
yeah.
Some live streams and stuff. So that's going to be a new little thing that we do when we cover an event next. So big thank you to Ray. A quick reminder, of course, to everybody who hasn't liked us on Facebook to give us a like on Facebook because there's a lot of fun on there. Facebook.com/Submission Radio AUS. You never know who's going to stop by on Facebook because recently we put up a post about Michael Bisping retiring. And who comments on the post? Of course, a previous opponent, Elvis Sinichit, puts a photo of him and Michael together, a private photo in the comment section. and talks about what it meant for him to fight Michael Bisping.
That
and
was
what
awesome.
Yeah. So you just don't know who's going to stop by the comment section of that. We have a lot of great people who have liked the page, and there's a lot of fun. We like to put up some fun videos, so give it a like. And of course, our YouTube, youtube.com/submission radio. If you guys listen to this show on iTunes or TuneIn or Stitcher or whatever you listen to it to, there's actually a video element to it now. We still get people who are absolutely surprised when they see our faces and realize what we look like. You can jump on. You'll actually be able to see the fighters. We do Skype interviews now, so jump on, give it a subscribe. It kind of adds a different dimension to a lot of the interviews, especially if you guys want to sort of save a fun one, listen to it on iTunes or tune in, and then save a fun video one for later on and check that out on YouTube. And of course, Twitter. Give us a follow on Twitter. I don't think we the GIF kings, but we definitely like to GIF around, don't we, Cash? We like to look for a fun GIF. We like to have a bit of fun. We like to have a bit of a joke around there. We like to interact with people. You mentioned that our DMs are actually open, so yeah, you guys can jump on. You can send us a message and stuff like that. Sometimes we don't see the messages straight away because there's two sections where you have to like approve a message from people, but we definitely do check them frequently to see. So if we don't get back to you guys straight away, we're just too silly to not check both sections.
Yeah. No, you're right. We're not the GIF kings, but we do straight GIFing, right? Just straight GIFing. Just a lot of GIFing. No GIFing around here. Just quickly, I think this is the longest we've ever gone without me announcing who we have on the show. I mean, if you
that's right.
Oh yeah, I guess that's right. Yeah, no, look, but just quickly before I do, I had a dream as well, right? While we're sharing dreams, you had your Brock Lesnar dream that I was featured in, which is pretty cool. I had a dream and you were featured in it as well last night, Dennis. How about that? In like the 3 hours of sleep that I got, managed to hit REM sleep. You were there. You made an appearance. We were at some kind of like weird strip club, but it wasn't like a typical strip club. It was more like a theater, like a movie theater, like a cinema. There was chairs.
Like a burlesque kind of setup.
I want to say it was, but it kind of wasn't. It was just like a regular cinema. Like it's just weird purple chairs, and then like the girls would come out and they'd like dance, kind of like a preview. And if you wanted to take them for a private dance, you could. And we were just kind of sitting there like, you know, a bunch of perverts, so it wasn't that far off the dream. And then this one stripper came, and then she was a bit of a bigger girl, and then she was dancing, and then she took a bit of a tumble, but then she turned it into a sweet barrel roll, right, and ended up doing a flip. You know, like Chael Sonnen when Anderson Silva had his leg, I think it was the first, no, it was the second fight, and then he kind of turned around and did that flip. That's pretty much exactly what she did, and then we all applauded. We were like, amazing, amazing, she's so amazing. And then I woke up, and I was like, what the fuck just happened? It's very random. Very, very random. But you were there. You and me looked at each other like when that happened. We kind of gave each other a nod. And like we didn't say anything, but the nod said it all. It was like, oh my God, she's amazing. So very random. Anyway, enough of that. Our guest on this week, John Gooden, is returning to the program. A lot's happening with John Gooden. He actually had, him and his wife welcomed a brand new baby daughter, baby Elodie, to the world. It wasn't over the weekend. I think it was a couple of weeks now, but obviously that's one of the reasons why he wasn't at UFC Liverpool, so we want to chat to him about that, what's happening in his life, and of course UFC Liverpool, of course Darren Till, Wonderboy Thompson, Michael Bisping retiring. You know, he's a guy that's known Bisping through the years, so I want to get his thoughts on that, and you know, UK stuff. Megan Anderson making her first appearance on the program, obviously taking on Holly Holm, UFC 225, a very, very Aussie-filled card, so I'm really excited to be talking to Megan Anderson for the first time ever. I heard that the UFC wanted to, they wanted her to send them all of her tattoos. I don't know how you really go about doing that, but I don't know. Maybe they're looking for like some kind of gang tattoos or something, but I want to ask about that, and of course the fight itself. Michael Chiesa. No one's really heard from Chiesa in quite a while, so we've got him on the program. A caveat, a disclaimer, there is an embargo regarding the events of, you know, April 7th, UFC 223, so we can't really get into that. But we can sort of talk around that and sort of get his thoughts. Obviously, he's facing Anthony Pettis at UFC 226, so yeah, there's a lot of exciting things. And of course, that's not all. Our boy Sean Sheehan returned to the program, isn't he, Dennis? Yeah,
that's right. He joins us after celebrating his birthday and going to a wedding. So who knows what kind of state he'll be in. It'll be late at night, early morning over there. He's going to give us his thoughts on UFC Liverpool, of course, Bellator 200. We'll talk about that. Stephen Thompson, Darren Till, who won that fight. We sort of discuss it. We give our thoughts. Also, Michael Bisping retires. We share our thoughts on that as well. So lots of stuff to talk about there. Gegard Mousasi, Rory McDonald, Are we excited for that fight? All of that. He'll be breaking it down later on in the episode. So there's a lot of reasons to be excited, guys. Before we go to the first guest, just a quick reminder, if you do have a chance and you do enjoy the program, give us your iTunes reviews. We love these reviews. We'll be going through them soon and reading our favorite ones out onto the program very, very soon. So jump on, give us your thoughts. We love the kooky reviews. We love the creative reviews. If you spend some time, we'll definitely be reading them out. It helps the program as well. So if you guys do enjoy it, jump on and give us your reviews. But Cass, you mentioned it. There's a big action-packed. I mean, we spoke about our dreams. We spoke about how cold it is here. We've kind of covered all the quotas. There's a big show here with Submission Radio. We have our first guest on the line. He's coming from a little bit further away than usual, and you're about to introduce him.
All right, guys. Our next guest is not only an excellent UFC commentator and presenter, but also one of the sharpest dressers in the company. He's here to discuss UFC Liverpool, Michael Bisping's retirement, Darren Till potentially taking over as the UK's leading man, but probably no news bigger than the fact that him and his wife have just welcomed their first child into the world. Congratulations, John Gooden. Welcome, and congratulations, man. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks, man. Cheers. Yeah, pretty big deal for us. So, yeah, little Elodie Willow Gooden was born on the 9th, and these bags under my eye, they weren't here before that. This is a very new thing for me. I am learning a lot every step of the way. Just trying to keep a little person alive is pretty difficult.
Oh man, that's hilarious. I want to find out how you came to the name, but for people that don't know, this is the reason why you weren't really present at UFC Liverpool, because even though Brendan Fitzgerald does an excellent job, we feel like your British accent and insight was very much missed, John. It would have been good to see you at this event.
I appreciate you saying that. Look, we got a really strong team at the UFC to cover, each other and whatever, and there's enough to go around as well. But it hurt that someone else is in that seat for a Liverpool show. Anyone, it's just I desperately wanted to be there. It was historic. I had actually commentated in Liverpool before for Cage Warriors. I think it was their first show at the Echo as well, a very long time ago. So it was one of those things. The due date, because Elodie is still not supposed to be here. The 4th of June is the due date, and she came like 3.5 weeks early. So my wife said, really 2 weeks, maybe even a month before and a month after that date, she had grounded me essentially. But I had pushed back on some other stuff. I probably shouldn't say, but yeah, I had pushed back on some other commitments as well. So I couldn't do them. And then Liverpool was one of them. Singapore was another one. But then I did a U-turn on that and sat my wife down and said, look, I just professionally, I love my job. And I just, it's just tough, that as much as we're all a team, there's competition for this. Not just the guys that are in the UFC, but other people that want that spot as well, commentating, calling fights for the UFC. I'm very aware of that. I'm not an employee. So yeah, it was tough. But so I had to miss out on commentating the fights. I was there. I got the green light to go. And what an atmosphere. I'm sure we'll come on to it. But yes, that was the reason why. And as I've said before, I think I said this when Goldie was in Scotland. And also when Anik was doing it with Dan, it's weird because Dan and I have such a close relationship, on a UFC level, like as friends and as broadcast partners. And then you're seeing someone else.
Yeah, he's cheating on you on TV, basically.
Dining with your guy, right? It's bizarre. But I was actually hanging out with Brendan after as well. He's the first time I met him. He's a good guy.
Yep. You just mentioned something that's really interesting to me, John. You mentioned how you're not technically like a UFC employee and how you always do look at these guys sort of coming in and wanting to take your spot. Explain how that kind of works for us, because it's something that I guess a lot of fans don't really realize. I mean, when they see John Gooden, they think this guy is a fixture of the UFC. Everything's guaranteed for him, for the future. But there is a little sort of air of uncertainty at times, isn't there, when it comes to this kind of gig?
There definitely is. And I've struggled with it, if I'm honest, because I got into broadcasting for mixed martial arts. And so when I got this gig, it's like the pinnacle of what I could do. Like, I'm here. This is what I want to do. I'd like to have a crack at doing the Olympics, some kind of broadcasting for the Olympics. on the BBC would probably be, if you want to be like a recognised broadcaster in the UK here, that is a great spot. But otherwise, I mean, that's like a cherry on the cake. Day in, day out, you know, I'd never surrender what I do with the UFC or work in mixed martial arts to go and do that. I you know, that's not going to happen. So when I got offered this opportunity with the UFC, yes, they don't guarantee you any number of shows or anything like that.
Wow, so it's like a private contractor situation.
It's exactly that.
Wow.
And they can walk away from me and not ring my phone, and there's nothing I can do about it. But equally, I can, if I'm not comfortable, I can walk away without penalty as well. So not that I ever see that being an option. It's definitely the other way around. So yeah, it's tough, and I think the difference with me and the way that I approach things with the sport is because I almost feel like I'm part of the UFC team, even though I'm not. When I'm not working, I kind of get a little. I'm like, what's going on, and why aren't I getting these opportunities? But really, I'm just another body that is brought in. I have a really good relationship with the production team over in Vegas. I'd literally just got off the phone to them now, actually, because I do quite a lot of producing for the UFC, which is what keeps me ticking over financially, if I'm honest. I'm going out to produce, like I produced a feature for Darren Till. I've been out with Jimmy Manuwa, Alexander Gustafsson this year. I'm going out to see Leon Edwards in the next couple of days.
Nice.
So I do quite a lot of that stuff over here in Europe, and that's given me a whole new skill set, something that I really enjoy doing. And I work closely again with the producers who do the live shows as well. So it's really helped me bolster that relationship and understand what they're needing out of things. I'm super grateful for that. But people don't see that. So when conversations happen around commentators, UFC commentators, I do sometimes feel like my name's left out a little bit, which is frustrating because we all want to be recognized for the work that we're doing. Particularly,
do you mean by fans, or do you mean by the UFC themselves?
Oh, not the UFC. No, I can't fault them for their commitment to me and support. I think actually sometimes from my peers, and yeah, maybe a little bit from the fans. Although I don't get a lot of hate, and I understand that I'm not going to be everyone's cup of tea because of my accent, my looks, and whatever else. But one thing I'd like people to recognize is just the work. You know, I've started grassroots here, and I don't think that any other commentator, play-by-play, can put in the amount of hours that I do always round. Like Anik is on that mic so much. He couldn't prepare for a fight card like I do, and I train it as well. Like I'm trying to pick up the physical skills to add to it, and yeah, So yeah, sometimes I feel like I'm working behind the scenes, and it doesn't pair up necessarily with being front and center and look like someone in the sport that you see a lot of. But that's down to me. That's on me. That's a personal feeling, and it's down to me to get myself out there a little bit more, which I'm trying to do at the moment. And yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with it. So it keeps us all nervous, I think, but that's broadcasting. That's not UFC specific. That's just broadcasting for you.
And obviously, there's a lot of really fun pairings right now when it comes to commentating fights in the UFC. You know, obviously Jimmy Smith's in the picture now. There's a lot of really talented guys. I know you and Dan Hardy obviously do an amazing job. John Anik is fantastic. But do you ever think about some other dynamics that you'd like to try in the future, possibly if you get an opportunity? And when you see some of these big cards overseas, in places like America, do you ever wonder if you'll get that chance? Because, I mean, I know you've got the accent, and a lot of people are like, well, you know, it's an accent. It works well for all these international shows when they go on the road. But a lot of people feel like, John, that you would be great in a big pay-per-view, for example, in Las Vegas, you know? So have you thought about that? And has the UFC ever spoken to you about even possibly getting a chance there? And also, is it kind of like fighting where if a commentator sort of gets sick or pulls out, are you on their sort of list of guys to call in case there's a last minute? Are you a bit of a Ally Quinta in that sense.
I like Quinta. Well, raging. Yeah, I don't have the balls that Al does. I tell you what, this weekend I made it very well known. I went to that show with a little flash stick in my pocket. I had my notes ready. I was like, if anything happens to Brendan, like I'm in. Like if my best friend decides that he's going to lock him down in the gents' toilets for an extended period of time just so that I can take that seat, then so be it. But no, seriously, I prepared about 50% of what I normally would do because I didn't see the program elements, but I did my fighter notes for Liverpool just in case. I mean, I enjoy doing it, and I just thought if the BBC were there as well. They were doing a very first radio broadcast at a UFC event, which is a big thing over here. And again, I had some interaction with people that were trying to set that up. So if anything can happen to their broadcast team, I was good to slide right in. So I have, but however, that again, that's on me. That wasn't the UFC going, you better get ready just in case. That doesn't happen. I don't have a visa to work stateside. And I think that's a big thing. So you can't just slot in. I have asked about getting a visa, and with all due respect to all parties, it's super expensive. It's been an interesting time since I joined because in the time that I've been there, there've been a lot of changes of senior staff over in Europe and international offices. And then IMG, WME came in, and now we've had the new TV deal. So there's been a lot of uncertainty. So in all fairness to everyone, like why would I commit to spending maybe $10,000 for a 3-year work visa if all of a sudden all presenters, commentators were just, a whole new stable of men and women were brought in. So until we have some kind of certainty, then I'll probably approach that conversation again. But for our sport, mixed martial arts, I think I really do need to get a visa to work stateside, even if it's not as a commentator, maybe as an analyst. Maybe I can go on the desk. I'd love to present that show, like a pre-fight show, post-fight show. That'd be cool. Yeah, working with some of those characters on that'd be awesome. But right now, that's not the case. If I ever got the opportunity, I'd love to. I love the States. And I'll work with whoever. Dan and I have work to do over here. Like that's the priority. We're trying to develop the sport in Europe, specifically in the UK, because that's what I think we can affect most significantly. And honestly, no one's working harder than Dan right now. Oh my God, that guy's schedule, what he's doing. People are recognizing what he can add, and they're taking full advantage of that. But yes, we are aligned in what we're trying to do, and we feel it's important work. But yeah, I loved working with DC. I have to say, I had just a riot with him over a few days. That was good fun. When Brian Stan was there, we did a fight card down your way over in New Zealand. Again, really enjoyed that, and kind of I think maybe I challenged him in a few different ways to what he had been challenged before in a broadcasting sense. So that was good. But yeah, look, who wouldn't want to work with the champions and the pay-per-view kings like, Joe Rogan and Jimmy Smith? Yeah, but I have important work here to do with Dan. We both believe in that. But I'll take any. I'm here to represent mixed martial arts, the UFC, myself. Give me a microphone and I'm going to do my best.
I love it. Before we go to Liverpool and talk about that a little bit, just quickly, I mean, when thinking about the job that you do, like I've never commentated before, and obviously me and Casper aren't a part of the UFC team, but for some reason I always had this thought in my mind, like after John's done commentating his show, he'll get a call from Dana White, or he'll get a call from someone up above, and they'll be like, hey, John, like, you did a really good job. And or they might have some criticism on the phone and be like, oh, John, you did a really good job, but at this point, we wanted you to say this one, wanted you to say that. So for people that don't know how it all works, talk us through it. Once you're done with an event, do you have someone from up above who sort of speaks to you after the event? Is it like a WWE situation where one of the earphones has like a producer in it and they sort of give you directions as you go through? How much feedback do you actually get from the UFC after you do an event?
Well, quite conscientious with all of this stuff. I'm again I don't know how anyone else does it, but maybe a fault of mine, because I do go searching for that feedback from the people at the UFC. Like, how did I do? How was that? And I'll get an idea pretty early on if everyone was happy with it, and then maybe in the next couple of days I might hear something from senior coordinating producer. I might not, but often I do, and I think we have a solid relationship now, and they understand that I want to get better. So I often skip the good parts anyway. I don't tend to indulge in that. It's really weird. It's the human condition. I've looked into this because we all try and better ourselves as well. And I've been one of those people that would go through the feedback and just see the negative, not the positive, just because I don't want to overindulge, become arrogant, complacent, or any of those kind of things. So, yeah, I do get feedback, and I will look to make changes. So I remember the feedback I got on London. There were a few things that I'll take on board, and when I get the chance in Singapore, I'm gonna make sure that the elements that were picked out, I'll over deliver on those.
Wow, that's awesome. John Gooden 2.0 coming to Singapore.
Yeah.
We do have to get your thoughts, obviously, on UFC Liverpool, Darren Till versus Wonderboy. People are still discussing who they thought won the fight. It was a fairly closely contested contest. Some people found it a little bit disappointing, not really as action-packed as they had liked. What did you think about the fight, and who do you think actually won the fight?
Yeah, well, I'm a purist, so, and I was invested in that fight just because it's Liverpool. Darren's a big star coming up. Wonderboy's a huge star already. An interesting little piece of information about Wonderboy, just to kind of illustrate the kind of guy that he is. My very first sort of semi-assignment was UFC 170. I went over to Vegas to call the fights, but they were never broadcast. It was Dan and I having like a run out before we actually got the London gig. And I think Wonderboy was debuting on that show. I crossed him in the halls, and he stopped to shake everyone's hand and say hello. Like, he had I hadn't been announced as a commentator. He had no idea who I was. I can't remember who I was with, but he made an effort just to introduce himself to people and say hello, and just a really nice guy. And I worked in International Fight Week, where we did a thing at Top Golf. Again, brilliant with the fans, and just everyone around him. He's just a really nice guy to be around. So I held him in really high regard. And then there's this young guy called Darren Till, who I've now commentated on a few of his fights. I've produced a feature with him for the UFC. I did a personal project with him, which UFC Fight Pass took. I don't know if you guys saw it. It was called In Depth.
We were watching it the other night. It was really, really good, yeah.
Oh, cool. Thanks. Yeah.
You smashed it. Criticism. There's no criticism, John. It's all good stuff. Don't be asking us stuff after this about things that we didn't like.
Listen,
it was perfect.
I'll take some feedback on it. Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed it. And it's kind of going, what I said at the top about me being just I feel like I need to be putting myself out there a little bit more. Yeah. And sometimes people that have grown up in the TV game, they're go-getters. So they go and create this stuff themselves, and then they sell it on, repackage it, whatever it is. And I need to be a bit more like that. And leverage the relationships that I've got. So hopefully there will be more of those. Whether or not Fight Pass take them, I'm not sure, but look out for those. So with that, I've been in that camp quite a bit. So I wanted to see how it worked. I'm not saying that I had, it works well for our market if Darren wins, for sure, but the best man has to win, always. I'm neutral in that sense. The best man has to win. You celebrate the winner, absolutely. Personal thoughts completely aside, but I had been in a camp, and I was seeing how they were putting it together. So it was super interesting for me to watch that play out. And I was rocking, my leg was going about a million miles an hour watching this, because I saw karate versus Muay Thai and Darren Till versus Wonderboy, and their styles coming together, and that chess match that ensued. I can see how some people didn't get the amount of action that they perhaps wanted, but I mean, I loved it. I really did. It would have been nice for either of the fighters to have like a knockout, and then there's no doubt, and they can move on. But I think we're probably going to see that one rerun. But I thought that Darren as well. I think you'll probably ask me that question, so I'll say it. I thought that Darren won it, and I've seen the stats as well. I think the stats probably tell that tale, but it's so close. It's so close, and I wouldn't have been unhappy if they'd have scored it for Wonderboy either. But super tight, but I had Darren down as the winner for that.
Talk to us a little bit about, you mentioned how you spent a lot of time with him, and it's a great feature. I think people should still go on Fight Pass and check that out, because
it's not
because it's really
fight.
good. It's a really good insight into Darren Till, and you guys had a really good connection in that. So guys need to check it out for sure. But talk to us a little bit about Darren Till. You know, we know he missed weight. There was some personal issues that Dana White didn't want to disclose, and he said sort of Darren Till will tell people about that down the track. But how much do you think, did it give him an advantage not sort of making the weight, or was it sort of a detractor for him because he had to make that weight on fight day, the 188 pounds? Do you think that affected him? And do you think going forward, this is the weight class for him? Because he is a really big dude. I mean, standing next to Wonderboy Thompson, we know he didn't make the weight, but he looked huge compared to Wonderboy. And Wonderboy is not a tiny welterweight. Yeah.
I spoke to some people close to him, and the stuff that was going down had a very negative impact on the weight cutting process. And from what I understand, I don't know because I haven't asked Darren, but he's very good at managing the psychological aspects of the game. But that would have been a true test. So I put him in a similar category, and it's an obvious comparison. But someone like Conor, who's able to quieten down everything else, just if you're looking at a soundboard, you just pull all the levers down, and then just have that one up that you need to see, feel, and hear, so that you can perform on fight night. Because I mean, that show was built for him. There are a lot of people in there, a lot of pressure. Liverpool was hot as well, with the football going on and all of that kind of stuff. And then he has adversity during fight week, and at the business end of fight week as well. He's got to overcome that. And he didn't even know whether he was going to be fighting, whether he would be able to make the walk, because he had to hit a certain weight limit. I think he had to cut again, because he immediately went up to like 190 something, the lower end of the 190s, and then he had to cut back down to 188 on fight day, and then went away to rehydrate again. So that would have taxed his body. And but I thought, when you consider that, okay, there's a lot of stuff that people will be saying about the lack of professionalism, and Darren's held his hands up. If everyone knew the full facts, and I'm speculating here, then maybe they go a little bit easier on him. I think he stays at that weight class. I think he stays at that weight class. I think as he develops in this game, he will probably control other elements a little bit better. Financially, he's going to have those resources as well. So I can see him getting like a live-in chef or something next as well. But yeah, listen, he's a young man. He's learning as he goes. I think he stays at 170. I think he fights up in the future for sure. But yeah, I think it did affect him. But we didn't see, but maybe not that much, because the margins are so small and it was such a tight fight, and Wonderboy was the number one guy for a reason.
I remember in depth he was saying to you how he doesn't like people doing things for him, like even with like a waiter coming in and pouring his Coca-Cola for him. He's like,
That's a good point.
I can do it myself. So him having a live-in chef, wouldn't that be funny? He'd be like, no, I can cook it. He'd probably cook his own food and then cook the chef some food. But I was going to say, like, with all the controversy surrounding this is supposed to be kind of his crowning moment. Didn't really, end up that way exactly, I guess, like the UFC and he had hoped. But how much does this win do for him, in your opinion, John? And also, who would you like to see him face next? Do you think maybe, him finding a guy like Usman, while, say, the welterweight division title picture sort of sorts itself out, makes sense for him? And just quickly, by the way, I found it pretty crazy how even in the title, in the post-fight presser, he was saying like, no, I don't deserve the next title shot. Give it to one boy. Anyway, I think that's one of the things why people kind of like him, because he's fresh, original, and he's ridiculously honest.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he really is. Who would I like to see him fight next? I mean, just seeing him in the octagon is fantastic because he's got is so exciting. The Usman fight makes sense for sure, and we would get to see him challenged from the wrestler's approach.
Yep.
Covington, you know, that fight is for the interim, so you know those guys should go on to fight for the title. So I think we have to take those guys out of the picture. I think he's also mentioned fighting Masvidal, which, if I'm honest, styles-wise, I think that's mouth-watering. I'd love to see that fight. But in terms of, you know, the pecking order and answering questions and getting that done, getting to fight Usman. If he beats Usman, then it's like, my God, this guy like shuts down a wrestler. It's not just strikers or mixed martial artists that he's beaten. It's guys with that bias. So, you know, I think Darren wants to challenge himself in all ranges against everyone and anyone. He really doesn't give a fuck.
Yeah.
And he'll take on anyone. But I don't think a title shot comes for him just now. As you say, maybe it wasn't the romantic ending that he perhaps wanted, but it's the very highest level, and it's two strikers, you know, trying to outwit one another. So it was, yeah. But if it had ended emphatically, I still think the same question. I still think he gets in line. I don't think that he's the next guy, even if he won, you know, really convincingly. I think the other guys have served their time, and Darren would happily stand behind them in the queue.
Well, it's fascinating to see. It's fascinating to see what happens next, because I know Dana White wants to take him to Las Vegas. I wonder what's going to happen. Will it translate over to the fan base in America, and will they sort of take to him like they did to Conor McGregor, and will the Liverpool fan base sort of travel to see him fight? I'm very, very interested about that. But we want to talk to you about Michael Bisping, John, because obviously we saw that he chose to retire. He spoke about it on his podcast, about his decision to retire and how he sustained another eye injury. This time it was to his good eye, and he was starting to see flashes, and they were talking about a possible Rashad Evans fight, I believe, but that didn't really come to fruition, and he was watching the movie and realized, I don't really need this. What did you make of the news, the fact that he decided to retire at this stage and not have that last fight? Are you happy that he sort of didn't go on and didn't sustain any more damage, or did you sort of want to see him go out on a sort of signature win, possibly somewhere in your neck of the woods?
Health first. Health and fighter safety first every single time. And if he had doubts, concerns, he did exactly the right thing for himself, for his family. He's done enough. He's won the title. It would have been really nice to see him have like a final walkout, a big fight against another veteran like Rashad would have been great. Although it's kind of weird that they work pretty closely together.
Yeah.
Someone like Machida would have been really good as well. So I don't know, but all I can say is that it's now time to celebrate the career of Michael Bisping. He's hung the gloves up. I think it's the right time as well. You know, if there's any kind of health concerns, then you got to take care of yourself, and you got to hang him up. He's been the champion. It's not going to get any bigger than that. And the way that he went around about winning that championship, you know, when you take the whole career, it's just incredible. It's a fantastic story. You know, there's a movie in there, there's books in there. He's a Hall of Famer for sure. We'll be carrying him through the streets over here when he comes back. But and he's what a figure. Do you know what I mean? What a personality. I know he's not everyone's cup of tea, but he's been, like, from a personal perspective, the interactions that I've had with him have been really, like, really cool. He's said some really nice things to me. He's been nothing but easy to work with. Again, I've done some producing with him, and I've been honored to call a couple of his fights now. And I can't speak more highly of him. My very first gig, actually, for the UFC, before I was taken on as a commentator, I was doing like a live Q&A in a bar in Manchester. This lineup was incredible, by the way. We had Michael Bisping, Conor McGregor, Dustin Poirier.
Holy shit.
And I think we might have had Gustafsson. They were there. And then they Skyped in Vitor Belfort, Rory McDonald, Dan Hardy. And was there someone else? Oh, that's really bad. I've forgotten if there was someone else. But I think, yeah, then there was someone else
that's amazing,
Skyped as well. What an audience, you know? It was incredible. So that was the very first time that I actually got to kind of meet Mr. Bisping, work with him a little bit. And Conor was there. We were in Manchester. Conor was getting a lot of love at the time, and you could see Michael was agitated, but they're under the same management, so they clearly spent some time together.
What do you mean agitated by Conor?
Yeah, exactly right. I think Conor was stealing the limelight a little bit, and we were in Manchester, so the older statesman kind of shut it down a little bit, and he exerted his authority there.
So he won in the public kind of face-off, so to speak.
I think to Conor's credit, he's like, listen, dude, this is Manchester, this is your time, this is your town, and you have this. But that was back then.
Yeah.
So that was very cool. That was very cool. And I've just got memories from when I first started in mixed martial arts. We had a couple of bigger guys on our team, the hybrid fight team, which was headed up by a guy called Mark Chen, many, many years ago now. And a few of them went up to spar with Bisping up at the Walther Academy. And I remember the rest of us were just waiting for these guys to come back, just to see what it was like. What was it like sparring him, you know? Could you get near him? Did you lay a glove on him? And they just said he was another level. And these are guys like, won't maybe mean much to you. There's a guy called Dennis Sutherland over here who's a very high level, kind of domestic and European operator. A lot of success over here. So just different levels, you know. And so he's been someone that I've always looked up to for many different reasons. And we've got a lot to thank him for.
Oh, 100%. And I definitely think it was a wise decision on his part. I know John Anik was on the show a couple of weeks ago, and he briefly mentioned and then kind of veered away from it. I don't think he wanted to get into it, but he kind of mentioned that, you know, a lot of us want to see him retire, and I think that, you know, privately, a lot of people close to Bisping, maybe, you know, other commentary team people and other people in the UFC kind of would have rather to see him go out like this. So I think it's kind of more relief than anything else. But I was going to say, you know, from your perspective, just while we're talking about legacies and sort of the one he'll leave behind, and while we're celebrating his career, what do you think you were more impressed by when it comes to Bisping? You know, his sort of heart and determination, the fact that he bounced back from these ridiculously devastating losses, and then in the end, he won the title and he made something huge out of his career, or the fact that, you know, his ability to make people care about his fights, because he was probably one of the best trash talkers, you know, in the history of the sport. He probably got Chael Sonnen and Conor McGregor maybe tied for first and second, or first and first, and then probably Bisping right in there. And he always made people care about fights, even if they weren't against the highest names. You know, he always found a way to really get people connected to his fights. What do you think his legacy will be in this sport?
Yeah, listen, it doesn't matter how much you talk, you got to back it up. So it's always the performances. You know, his performances over the years, his achievements, the fashion in which he got there, you know, the ups and the downs. And I commentated that fight against Rockhold when really we came off the mic, Dan and I, and we kind of looked at one another and we thought that was probably his last chance at reaching the top.
Yeah.
And then we commentated Silva versus Bisping in London on that crazy kind of Fight Pass pay-per-view event, which it was probably one of my career highlights. So significant. I mean, Anderson Silva, oh my God, and then Michael Bisping, Jesus.
That was a crazy fight as well, just with everything that happened in that fight.
Yeah,
as a
so
commentator. That would have been a crazy time for you and Dan to be in that position.
So dramatic. We had to be so dialed in because there were regulatory things going on and all kinds of stuff. And the way in which he came back from, you know, from being out pretty much, and then found it in himself to get back out there. You know, credit to him and his corner team. Amazing stuff. That really is a career highlight for me. Just as a UFC fan, just being in that building, in that presence, and being around that all week was something else. And that, I think, that kind of embodies Michael Bisping. That kind of fight, you know, underdog, down, maybe out. No, he's not. Comes back, gets the win, talks well after. You know, as much as he shit talks his way in the fight, you know, when he leaves, he's always, you know, he's respectful and he owns up. He's like, yeah, I'm just trying to hype the fight. So he's lovable in many respects, but I know there's going to be a bunch of people that he's always been a bit Marmite. But yeah, I mean, I'm super grateful for what he's done for the sport over here. If it wasn't for him, then yeah, I probably wouldn't get anywhere near a microphone.
Yeah, no, he's fantastic. I think Australia was almost a second home because I believe his wife's family's from Australia as well. So he's down here. I think he did a lot for Australia in terms of that Michael Bisping Luke Rockhold fight. It was a fight night card, but people don't realize that was a big card for Sydney, and that was actually the first event me and Casper covered as media. So we remember talking to Michael Bisping behind the scenes, and he's just a classic guy. Yeah. I think the thing about him was the UFC could always rely on Michael Bisping to build fights, no matter what they gave him, and he'd always take the fights of the difficult guys without any name value from time to time. And sort of the UFC would rely on him to build the card. So the guy's an absolutely amazing guy. And speaking of amazing guys, John, thank you so much for your time. Guys, it's not too late. Jump on and check out Darren Till In Depth on UFC Fight Pass right now. It's a fascinating watch. And, of course, John, we hope you put out more of these. Even if they just go on YouTube, they don't need to go on Fight Pass. I almost feel like when they go on YouTube, more people can access them. So we look forward to seeing what happens next. And, of course, check out the podcast, The Journey of Discovery, with John Gooden. Check that out. Make sure to follow him on Twitter at John Gooden UK. And of course, a big congratulations from all of us here at Submission Radio, John. So happy for you and your family. It's fantastic. But now a father, a commentator, there's so much stuff going on, and excited to see your work in Singapore.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate that. Thanks for the love.
Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Demetrius Johnson, the UFC flyweight champion of the world, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
All right, guys, our next guest is set to make a long-awaited UFC debut at UFC 225, where she takes on Holly Holm, a former Invicta champion, and one of the most anticipated Aussies to step into the UFC octagon. Megan Anderson, welcome for the first time to Submission Radio. Good to have you on the program.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to finally have you not only on the program, but on video in all your tattooed glory, so we're very lucky to have that. Apparently, the UFC asked you to notify them and send pictures of all your tats. Is this true? Why would they do that? And what was your reaction when they asked for that?
This is true. So my immediate reaction was, I was like, the only descriptions I gave them was both sleeves, like left thigh, left leg, left foot, behind my left ear. And that was pretty much, they go, we're going to need like descriptions and pictures. I was like, I'll give you pictures, but there's no way I'm going to try and describe these.
Why did they want them? Did they explain why they needed that? Were they looking for some kind of like gang affiliated tattoos or something?
I have no idea. But I didn't give them the description, and they haven't said anything since, so I'm assuming that I'm okay.
Well, speaking of your tattoos, do you have a favorite one that sort of sticks out to you that you're most proud of?
I actually, like, it's a little bit upside down, but if you could see, there's like a little graveyard on the inside of my. That's like, weirdly, that's like my favorite one because it's like the smallest tattoo, but it has like a moon and like it has like a little dead tree and all this kind of stuff. Like, it's so small and it's like the smallest thing. It's on the inside of my wrist, but it has such like amazing detail. It's one of my favorite pieces.
What is the meaning behind that one? Why did you want to get that one done?
Nothing. It was just like a filler piece. Like we needed like just this section to be done, and we just kind of come up with the idea.
It's really clever the way they did that one. Very, very nicely done. So, on January 14th last year, you won the Invicta featherweight title after beating Charmaine Tweed and told Holly Holm and Jermaine to keep the belt warm for you. So, it's been such a long time coming, and there's even been a few false starts. How does it feel to now be less than 2 weeks away from finally officially making your UFC debut?
I'm very excited. It's definitely been like a long time coming, but I'm just happy that it's finally here. We've been preparing and training for this for so long, and finally all that hard work is going to be paying off.
Yeah, we imagine the last 16 months have been quite the roller coaster for you. You know, going from, you know, being Invicta champion to having 2 fights, you know, not come together. One of them obviously being Cris Cyborg, and just in general, just sort of being on the sidelines and not really doing what you love, not being able to. You know, how tough have these last 16 months been for you?
It's definitely been really tough. It's kind of, it's hard to kind of watch your career get put on hold. It's not what anyone wants. So it's definitely been hard, but we've been training hard. We've kind of used this opportunity to improve in a lot of areas. And, you know, the fighter that I am now is very different to the fighter that I was January of 2017. So we're really excited to showcase all my new skills and really put on a performance for everyone.
And it seems like there were some visa issues that were to blame for the delay in this UFC debut. For people that don't know the story behind it, can you sort of explain what happened?
It was just some personal issues that came up that were kind of out of my control, and I was unfortunately unable to fight Cris. But that you know that's all in the past now. So what matters is that I'm ready to fight, and I'm excited to showcase myself and my skills June 9th.
I was going to say, do you sort of feel like, you know, some of those tough times you've gone through, they've sort of helped you, I guess, forge the kind of toughness and resilience that, you know, you need to have in order to become a UFC champion?
Yeah, I guess, like, I would say, like, I've never really had, like, the easy way, even, like, outside of fighting in my everyday life. I always struggle, and I always, you know, have a lot of shit things happen to me. So, I guess it kind of helps me because in my opinion, what makes a true champion is someone who can use the pain and suffering that has happened to them and channel that into something great, and they can use that to become you know, even better in their specific field, or, you know, become an even better athlete, or they channel that into being a better person, you know. And I think that's really something that I've learned over the last year, and I've done a lot of, you know, self-reflecting, and you know, I've changed a lot through this process. And you know, I think it's really helped me to become, you know, not just a better martial artist, but in my mind, like, I am a champion, and I like to, I guess help other people realize that even though they might be going through, you know, shitty times, or like something hard, or, you know, their breakup, or whatever it may be, everyone can get through it, and you'll come out of the other side stronger and even more of a greater person than you already are.
And your career in general is about overcoming adversity. Your MMA debut didn't go your way, neither did your Invicta debut. And as you approach your next big milestone in your career, do you see it as an opportunity to kind of break the curse with your big UFC debut?
I don't really see it as like a curse. It's just, I guess, like different levels. Sorry, my camera just fell out.
That's all good. That's the curse speaking right there. Just kidding. I
guess it's like from my Invicta debut to now, it's very different. My training is very different. You know, I went into my Invicta debut against, you know, a black belt in judo who was like a purple or brown belt in jiu-jitsu, and I was like a 2-stripe white belt, which is seriously like, you've been training for a little bit and you know a little bit, and like you don't really know a lot. You just kind of survive. Whereas like in the space of, you know, 2.5 years, like I just recently got promoted to purple belt. My wrestling's improved immensely. My jiu-jitsu's improved a lot. My striking has, like, I'm improving from fight to fight. It's different. Like my training is very different. I have very specific coaches that we game plan, and we have specific game plans, and we know what we need to do. We know what we need to implement on June 9th. And you know, I feel like it's a little bit different this time.
And what a card to be finally making UFC debut on. You know, you got Whittaker in the main event. You got Tuivasa as well. What does it do for you to sort of be on a card with such a big Aussie presence?
I'm excited. Very rarely do we get Australians on American cards, so it's even rarer to have 3 on the one card. So I think it's really exciting to be able to share this opportunity. And I'm a huge fan of both Ty and Rob. So I'm not only excited to fight myself, but I'm really excited to support them and to support Australian MMA.
Yeah, it's absolutely huge. We're calling it the Australian takeover. And the big news recently was that your fight against Holly also got pushed up to the main card, so instead of the prelims. So what was your reaction to that news? And why do you think the UFC sort of decided to put you guys in such a sweet spot on the card? Obviously, it's a great fight, but there's so many great ones on the card.
Yeah, I don't really know. When I was at Invicta a few weeks ago recently, I did a little stuff with the UFC Fight Pass guys, and they kind of asked me like, "Oh, do you know where you're on the card?" I was like, "Look, I don't know. A lot of places have us on the prelims or on the main card." And they kind of said they were still figuring out the placement of the card, but they either had us as the main event of the prelims or on the main card, but they hadn't decided. And then UFC 224 came out, and then I found out that we were going to be on the prelims, the main event of the prelims, which, doesn't really bother me. Like, I'm just happy to fight. And then I think it was like a week later at UFC Chile, they announced that that we were going to be like the featured bout on the main card, which is phenomenal. And you know what? Like, I completely understand that I am in this position because of Holly and her name and the big name that she brings. But I'm happy. I was happy to be the first fight on the card. I'm happy to be the last. Like, I just want to fight, and I want to put on an amazing performance, and I want to show everyone what I'm capable of, and that I am one of the best in the world at 145 pounds, and I deserve to be here.
So just to clarify, so did you find out like everybody else did, just at UFC Chile, or like, nobody's told you that beforehand?
No, I found out on the broadcast, and
Wow.
I like flipped out. I was like, oh my God.
Wow, unbelievable. And considering you're really the only true featherweight in the UFC other than Cris Cyborg, why do you think the UFC sort of gave you Holly instead of just making the Cris Cyborg fight straight away?
I don't really know. The UFC has their reasons behind everything. I didn't really know who I was going to fight. Like, they tossed around a few names. So it could have been Cris, it could have been Holly. It could have been like a few other girls that they had in consideration. And so probably for like three, maybe 4 weeks, like I had no idea who I was going to be fighting, but they had told me that they either wanted me to fight on June 1st or on June 9th. So when I had a date, I just didn't have an opponent, and it didn't really matter for us. Like we were so ready to fight and to get into camp, and it didn't really matter. So whether it was Holly or Cris, like we would be prepared either way.
You mentioned obviously that a bunch of different opponents you had a whole bunch of different opponents, a whole bunch of different options. But what was your reaction when you saw it would be Holly Holm in the end? I mean, this is a really big name in the sport. Everybody still remembers her massive win over Ronda Rousey when she sort of dethroned her here in Melbourne. And ever since then, she's sort of been one of the bigger names in the UFC. I mean, she's not the champion Cris Cyborg is, but in a lot of ways, we even more excited to sort of be fighting her because of her name value.
Oh, definitely. I'm not stupid. Like this is even though it's fighting, you do have to market yourself, and you have to try and sell yourself and get your name out there so you can get the big fights, you can get the big money. Oh my God, I keep doing that. No. But at the end of the day, like, whether it was Holly or Cris, I wouldn't have cared, but like I am excited that it's Holly just for the name factor that she does bring, and people like Holly. People are going to want to tune into Holly and watch her fight, and that's just more eyes on me.
One of the theories, I saw an interview with Cyborg recently. She believes that the one of the reasons why the UFC put you on this main card, which I think, it makes a lot of sense, especially if you're making your UFC debut, maybe they want to set you up or sort of, I guess, promote you before you, eventually fight Cris Cyborg, and that's a good way to get people's eyes on it. Cyborg sort of put out her theory that the UFC essentially just trying to set up a rematch with Holly Holm and herself. Do you buy into that at all?
I don't really care what, Cris says or what Holly says or what this person says, like, because at the end of the day, it's just Holly and I in that cage, no one else. And, all I can control is me and my performance on June 9th, and the rest is all speculation. The rest is all, oh, what if this person wins? What if that person? That all doesn't matter until the result of June 9th happens. So, Cris can say whatever she wants. She's fought Holly before. That's familiar to her. She's fought her and she beat her. She knows she can, beat her again. I'm unfamiliar territory for Cris. She hasn't fought me. I'm young, up and coming. I'm improving with every fight. I'm getting better. I'm coming into my prime. I'm a big threat to her. So of course she's going to say she thinks that the UFC is going to trying to set up a Holly rematch. I've been underestimated and the least experienced in every single one of my fights. So, what's new? If experience won fights, then I'd be on a losing streak, but I'm not.
Well, I mean, we don't want to look past the fight. You obviously focused on Holly, but if things do go your way in Chicago and you do beat her, do you expect to get the next title shot? Do you think that's the right next step if you do beat Holly Holm, someone who has been in the sport for so long with such big name value?
I hope so. And but the UFC don't know with the UFC. They have their own kind of ways that they want to do things. They have their own ideas. But who knows? Whoever they want to put in, pending June 9th, because that's what I'm thinking about. After that, whoever they want me to fight, we're going to be ready.
Because I guess it's an interesting time with the featherweight division. Cyborg's sort of looking to finish her contract and move on to boxing. Do you see that as, the perfect time to sort of take over her reign before she leaves, and then you sort of become the new dominant UFC featherweight champion?
Yeah, definitely. I think Cris has done a lot for this sport, and I definitely would be excited to see her transition over to boxing if that's what she wants to do. I'm happy to fill that role before she leaves. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter because June 9th is what we have to focus on, and Cris is going to do what she wants to do with her career, and whatever happens next, I guess we'll be ready.
I think a positive sign, because for a long time, and I wonder if you were sort of worried about this in a couple of ways as well, was that, the UFC brought in the featherweight division kind of thanks to Cris Cyborg because of her popularity. But then there was a time there where it didn't look like they had too many other fighters in the featherweight division outside of Cris and Holly, for example. And then there was the whole time where people weren't sure if Cris was going to stick around or not. So then people were questioning whether or not a featherweight division was going to stick around when she goes. But now the UFC are having a female featherweight, ultimate fighter. So it looks like they're investing in the women's featherweight division. Looks like they're bringing new talent into the division. What was your reaction when you saw that? Was it a little bit of relief to see them really focusing on the featherweight division and kind of its future past Cris Cyborg?
Oh, definitely. I was so excited. I've been wanting them to do this for a really, really long time. Well, I guess at least the past year since they brought in the belt. I think it's really interesting that they decided to do a tough house as soon as I was able to fight. I thought that was really weird. I'm like, why didn't you do that within the last year? I don't know. But I'm just so happy that they're finally investing in the division. And every division has to start somewhere. You're not going to have amazing talent. Not every division is going to have 10, 15, 20 top-tiered fighters when you start a new division. Look at the flyweight division. It's kind of all over the place right now. You have girls who are, got 2 fights in the UFC, fighting, that are ranked in the top 10, so you have to start somewhere. You need different tiers. You need the lower level girls, you need the middle, then you need the high, top 10, top 5. Because without progression and increase in competition, no one gets better. So you kind of need a everything. And, I'm glad that they're finally realizing that and really committing to this division.
You mentioned you sort of wish that, or you were wondering why they didn't bring this in a little bit earlier when you were sort of on the sidelines. Do you kind of wish they maybe did a tough earlier, like let's say early last year, mid last year, so that way you could have sort of had some opponents in the meantime instead of being on the sidelines? Or do you think in some ways it kind of worked out because now in your first fight in the UFC, you're facing a huge name like Holly?
I guess it's kind of a bit of both.
Yeah.
I wish that they would have, just because like a lot of the girls have been wanting this opportunity for so long, and they deserve the opportunity. But I also am grateful that I'm able to debut against somebody like Holly and the caliber that she is. So it is kind of a bit of both, I guess.
Well, speaking of the caliber and the fighter that she is, I mean, she's an amazing striker. She's quite well-rounded. How do you feel like you match up with her going into Chicago?
I think I match up pretty well. I think they're going to be very surprised at the changes in my game. I think the Holly is a very skilled athlete. She's been doing this for a very long time. And I can see where people, who don't know about Invicta or haven't watched a lot of women's MMA outside of the UFC might not know who I am. So they kind of jump to the conclusion like, oh, she's not as tough as Holly. Oh, she's going to be outboxed, or she's going to be, out there. So I'm like, well, this isn't a boxing match. This is MMA. This is mixed martial arts. This isn't one discipline. And Holly tends to really only just fight one discipline when it comes to her fights that I've watched in the cage. And, that's where I'm different. Like I incorporate everything into my game, and people just haven't seen that yet. And, that's something that we're really excited to really show, that I'm not just a striker, that, my ground game, my grappling is up there as well. And, I see me matching up really well with Holly. I'm a lot bigger than her. I'm going to be a lot stronger. I'm going to be a lot longer. And I'm just excited to showcase that.
You mentioned how you've taken that time off to really evolve, and you've made huge improvements since we last saw you. Do you think that if they're, Holly and her camp sort of preparing for the Megan Anderson that we saw against Charmaine Tweed, that could be sort of to their detriment?
Yeah, definitely. Jackson Wink, they're a very prestigious gym. Like I'm sure they realize that I'm improving, and I didn't just sit around do nothing for a year. And I'm sure that they understand that this is they've got a tough fight on their hands, but I just don't think they know where that the tough fight on their hands is going to happen.
Of course, it's a little bit of a layoff for you, a little bit of, I suppose they say, cage rust. That's a term that's used quite a lot by commentators and sort of media people. Do you feel like the sort of break in between fights is going to have an effect on you? Or do you think it's just a mental thing? What are you sort of doing to avoid the effects of quote-unquote cage rust?
I don't really believe in cage rust. I think it's a mindset. I spent, I took it wasn't by choice, but before my Invicta fight, I had like a 10 or 11 month layoff. So I've been here before. It's nothing new. I can assure you that I get hit harder in training than I do in fights predominantly. So I'm pretty prepared to get hit. I'm not a big fan of the term cage rust. I think it's a term that has been used by particularly MMA media I feel like people buy into the idea of cage rust because that's what they want to push, and I think it's bullshit. Look at Dominic Cruz. He took 2 years off and come back and won the belt. It's a mindset. And I think MMA media is the people that kind of, I think they want to buy into something, and that's just that's just what they've come up with, and I think it's bullshit.
I know GSP once said that he didn't believe in sort of ring rust, and then he's all like, all right, now I'm changed on it. But we'll take the fall for this one, Megan. It was, you know, it was us sort of selling them, but you know, it's a fun marketing tool, and it makes things more interesting. You know, people might be doubting you at UFC 225, but you know, they're in for a shock. What is the official prediction as we let you go? What is the official prediction? How do you see yourself getting it done at UFC 225? You scoff like you don't want to do a prediction.
Yes.
It's another media tool.
Yeah.
I'm not going to predict. I'm not going to predict the way it's going to happen, but I can predict that my hand's going to be raised.
Well, how about this for a prediction? Any chance you get on the microphone afterwards, much like you did at Invicta 21? And if yes, what do you think you'll say? Do you have something in mind?
Oh, I have so many things in my mind. I want to, part of me wants to talk shit. Part of me wants to be respectful. Like, I'm just like, oh, I'm all over the place. I'm like, I don't know what to say, but I definitely want to, I definitely want to address the whole, oh, she's not experienced enough bullshit. I'm like, if experience won fights, I wouldn't be on a 4-fight winning streak right now. So clearly, like, can we stop using that? Can we stop using that phrase? Because it doesn't really mean shit anymore.
And is there a chance there might be a shoey in the octagon? We know Tuivasa, famous for his shoeys. Do you think there'll be an Aussie-wide shoey at the event if everyone wins?
I'm going to leave that up to Ty, and I guess maybe if we all win, at the after party, I can do one with like a soft drink or something like that, because I don't drink.
we saw you. We saw you and Laura Sanko sort of did a shoey together. I think she did the real thing, but you kind of had a stubby and you drank it out of the Chuck Taylor. I think Ty was pretty disappointed somewhere. He is deemed to teach me the ways of the shoey. I just want to get someone. I either want to get a shoe that I'm not going to ruin that I need first. Yeah, that's all right. I mean, look, not everyone's about the shoey life. Like, Robert Whittaker has been on the program. He despises the shoey, and he made it very clear that he absolutely will not be doing one. So, you know, we'll see. We'll see. There's a lot of reasons to tune in for... Yeah, exactly. He's like you know, the ringmaster. He kind of dictates what happens, what doesn't with the shoey culture. But there it is, guys. A lot of reasons to tune into UFC 225. Megan Anderson versus Holly Holm on June 9th. It's going to be 10th here in Australia and New Zealand, of course, due to the time difference. Fights, shoeys, of course, follow her on Twitter and Instagram at @MeganA_MMA. And, of course, the YouTube channel, Aussie and Fancy Breakdown, which she breaks down and previews fights alongside the very beloved Laura Sanko. So there's a lot of good stuff. And, Megan, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. Good luck in Chicago, and thanks for coming on.
No problem. Thanks so much for having me, guys.
This is Chael Sonnen, and you are listening to Submission Radio.
All right, guys. Our next guest is fresh from his debut behind the Fox UFC analyst desk from this past weekend. A top 10 ranked lightweight for the UFC. He takes on Anthony Pettis at UFC 226. It's a pleasure to welcome Michael Chiesa back to Submission Radio. And what's this? He looks like he's in some kind of pool, a pool of some sort. Michael, welcome to the program.
It's good to be here. I'm just in the tub hanging out with my buddy Joseph Benavidez.
Oh!
Yes. I love the hair, Joseph.
Were you behind Joseph?
This is the Broseph Benavidez Chiesa tour. We're about to beat up the Pettis brothers.
That's awesome, man. And did you guys just finish training, or what were you guys doing?
I was doing some strength conditioning, and Joseph was just wrapping up his last sparring. So we're just finishing up some recovery. So just hanging out, growing down.
I know this isn't the fashion red carpet, but what's your take on Joseph's new hair? People are saying it's pretty sexy. People are calling him, will the real Mr. Benavidez please stand up? What do you think of it?
Dude, he's the sex god of our generation, dude. I fucking love it. Makes me want to bleach my hair, too.
Yeah, I think he started something in the UFC now. Let's talk about your Fox Analyst Desk debut. Tell us, how did you enjoy doing it? What did it feel like being behind the desk for you for the first time?
It felt really comfortable. It's something that, I've kind of envisioned doing for a long time. I've always had this problem with kind of talking too much growing up. So I figured somewhere along the lines that would apply to something positive. So, it was, I felt pretty comfortable. You know, and it's cool to sit by Bisping. I didn't know he was going to retire the next day. You know, but it felt good. You know what I mean? I had a little bit of nerves, you know, once it came down to it, but that's pretty normal with anything. You know, it's almost like a fight. Like I'm so comfortable with fighting, but I still get a little nervous right before I fight. So it was almost like the same thing. I felt comfortable in the same sense. Once push came to shove, it was time to go live. You know, I was a little nervous, but that's good. Kept me on edge, and from the feedback I've gotten, I did pretty well.
Yeah, obviously got to get your thoughts on Bisping in a second, but yeah, how do you feel about it? Do you watch something back like this? Do you sort of watch your, I guess, you know, in this sense, your performance of sorts, and do you sort of analyze it yourself, and do you feel good about it?
You know, I haven't gone back and watched it yet, but, you know, I definitely want to go critique myself and make some adjustments. Obviously, you know, it's my first time, so there's a lot of things that need to be worked on. You know, I always try to undershoot myself, so I always, you know, keep myself on my toes. But a lot of people said I did really well for a debuter, so I still want to go back. I want to critique myself. I want to get better. You know, this is something that I can see myself doing, hopefully full time down the road. You know, this is more a lot of time when guys kind of get into that full time analyst role, guys and girls. It's more or less like maybe when they're kind of towards the end of their career, whereas I feel like I'm just hitting my stride. I'm in my prime. I just turned 30, but it's something that I want to dabble with. It's something that I want to do as much as I possibly can, as much as they'll have me. So, dude, I love it. It was so fun. I think that this weekend definitely will open up some opportunities for me right now and down the road.
Yeah, you've got a taste for it. You know, you're addicted to the analyst role now. But I was going to say, how did the opportunity pop up? Is this something that you kind of had to bang the door on and ask them and say, hey, I want this gig? Or is it something that they just kind of, you know, fell in your lap and you're like, and they just came to you and said, hey, Michael, do you want to do some analyst work?
I've been banging on the door for a while now. Definitely, I've been banging on the door for a few years. You know what I mean?
Wow.
And, I did, when I initially started to do it kind of publicly, I kind of did it in the wrong way and rubbed some people the wrong way. But ultimately, I think that one thing that's helped me get the opportunity to go be an analyst this last weekend was being down at the PI. It's gotten me a lot of face time with a lot of the UFC employees. And, you know, there's over 500 guys on the roster, so it's easy to get lost in the shuffle unless you're part of the top 1%. You know what I mean? So I think that being down here and getting some face time with the right people, I won't name any names, but just getting some face time with the right people and just expressing that, you know, I'm still very interested in this. And I think that definitely helped me.
Well, speaking of this past weekend, we just want to quickly touch on the Wonder Boy Thompson Darren Till fight. Tell us, I mean, it's a close fight. A lot of people had Thompson winning. A lot of people agreed with the decision with Till winning. Who did you think won that main event?
I definitely think Thompson won. I mean, it was evident from the get-go that Till was going to pressure him, but that's kind of plays into Wonder Boy style. You know, that karate style involves a lot of counter striking. So the fight kind of went just how I thought it would. I called that it would be a unanimous decision, but I called it would be for Thompson. And you know, I know that I said on the broadcast that I'd like to see the numbers because I think Thompson outstruck him. Numbers came back and Till actually outstruck him, but I didn't get to see the round-by-round stats. But here's the thing, even if Thompson won, it would still be very controversial. It's just one of those fights that's so close that, you know, it doesn't matter who would win. See, Joseph, it doesn't matter who would have won. It still would have been showered in controversy in terms of, like, who won the fight, this guy got robbed, so on and so forth.
Yeah, it was a crazy situation with obviously, you know, Wonder Boy being the much higher ranked guy flying down into Till's hometown. Do you think that, you know, how do you think it affected Till, the fact that he sort of, you know, the weight cut didn't go according to plan and he sort of seemingly had to weigh in the next day as well? You know, we're hearing that he may have to cut weight, you know, essentially on the day to make that 188. Do you think ultimately that was, you know, an advantage for him or a disadvantage?
Ultimately, I think, you know, he should have made weight the first time, and obviously that there's some family emergency he had to tend to.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna bash on the guy for that. Family comes first before everything, but making weight really is a big deal in this sport. But I think it kind of breaks even given the fact that he had to make weight the day of the fight. I mean, you got to think about this. Till's a really big guy. He even said on an Instagram post the day before weigh-ins, a fan asked him on his Instagram, how much he weighed, and he said 98 kilos. And for people that don't know kilos, that translates to 216 pounds, and that's the day before weigh-ins. So we're talking over 40-pound weight cut. And you can find this on his Instagram page. I'm not blowing smoke.
Yeah.
But you know, for him to weigh in at 174 and a half, he only got to rehydrate up 13 and a half pounds. Given from my own experiences cutting weight, being big for my weight class, I can go from 155 to 170 in the blink of an eye. You know what I mean? So Till definitely had to cut weight the day of the fight. So I think it kind of breaks even. You know what I mean? But maybe it benefited him to be lighter on fight day. I know that sometimes when I've overhydrated and came into the octagon a little too heavy, it's hampered my performance. But you know, either way, he should have just made weight. You know, when he was contracted to make weight.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, let's switch the topics and let's talk about you, Michael, because it's been a crazy last few weeks and I suppose sort of months for you. Of course, we know we can't talk about what happened with the bus incident at UFC 223, but just talk to us about what it felt like for you to actually not fight on that UFC 223 card and sort of having to sit back and watch it without being a part of it.
Well, first and foremost, I didn't attend the event. I didn't actually go to the fights. I watched them from my hotel room. But you know, it was devastating, man. I trained really hard. This was my first time I've done a full training camp in Las Vegas. First time I did a full training camp at the UFC PI. You know, my dad was born in Brooklyn, and he's not with us now, so it kind of fighting in Brooklyn had some deep meaning to me. And you know, I was very proud that I'd get the opportunity to fight where my dad was born. So you know, so that was definitely tough. It was a hard pill to swallow, and you know, it's still kind of hasn't digested yet. You know, I should be on to new blood right now, but I'm having to stay focused on Anthony. Hasn't been hard. He's a really tough competitor. But you know, I really was very well prepared for that fight. I mean, it's a bummer that I didn't get to go out and show the world on April 7th. You know, the product that I was going to bring to the octagon, but you know, you got to look at the glass is half full. You know what I mean? I'm getting the opportunity to fight in Vegas, same guy. You know, it gives me another training camp to be here at the PI and improve myself as a fighter, as a human being. You know what I mean? So, you know, I can't look at the negatives. I got to focus on the positives, and ultimately, everything is going to work itself out.
Yeah, that's crazy. I didn't realize you had that, you know, connection to Brooklyn because of your father being born there. So I guess that kind of adds another layer. That's crazy. I was wondering, sort of mentally, how did you sort of regroup afterwards? I know that like now the fight's been rebooked, but I imagine as a fighter, like when you train for weeks and weeks and weeks on end to fight a guy, you need that release, and you didn't really get that release. And I imagine, you know, being in that hotel room would have just been kind of surreal for you. How long afterwards was it before you kind of, I guess, collected yourself?
Dude, I was already, you know, it didn't take long for me to collect myself because, you know, within days of the incident happening, obviously I needed time to let my body heal. Not a lot I could say about that, but you know, I had to go home and kind of keep myself in check. You know what I mean? When I had all this, like, not like aggression, but I just had a lot of energy. I trained for 8 weeks really hard, and I didn't get to go fight. So I had all this energy, and you know, I had some circumstances that kept me from doing anything active for about 4 weeks. So kind of showed up here for Las Vegas to start my training camp with a lot of pent up energy.
Yeah.
But you know what? I'm doing. You know what? I just don't focus on it. You know what I mean? I'm just focused. You got to focus on the task at hand. You can't live in the past. You know, if I focus on all this stuff that happened in Brooklyn, you know, it could hold me back from having a good performance on July 7th. So, you know, all that stuff's behind me right now. I'm just focusing on what's ahead of me, and that's Anthony Pettis, July 7th. You know, I can't let this stuff cloud my vision. You know, my vision is to become a world champion. I will become a world champion. And if I keep myself held back from what's happened in the past, it can kind of hold me back for what I predict will happen for me in my future.
And speaking of Pettis, obviously when everything went down, he was one of the guys that was sort of named to potentially go in the main event against Khabib, but ultimately his team sort of decided against it, and we saw Al sort of ended up taking that spot in the main event. Were you surprised that Pettis didn't jump on the opportunity to be in the main event and fight for the title? And if you were in a similar position, I mean, it's a huge gamble. You're taking on a guy that you weren't preparing for, but if you got a shot at fighting for the title last minute against a guy like Khabib, do you think you would have taken that fight in a similar situation?
Dude, if somebody offered me a short notice fight against a champion, I don't care if it's Stipe Miocic. If they're like, hey, you want to fight Stipe on 24 hours notice for the title? I'm going to jump on it. You know what I mean? So different strokes for different folks. I can't say what was going on in his head. You know, the thing that surprised me most was just Max Holloway not being able to compete. You know what I mean? That's the biggest surprise of all of them. Anthony not stepping up to fight him or whatever. That doesn't surprise me at all. You know that someone on this card is going to step in at the opportunity. There's plenty of lightweights on the card, so you know that's kind of the only thing that surprised me about that instance was the commission not letting Max Holloway finish his weight cut.
Yeah, I actually saw your coach Rick Little. He was speaking about how he's sort of, I don't know if he's responsible for this mentality, but you're always at championship weight. That's kind of something they sort of drill in your mind at Sick Jitsu, that always be ready, always be at championship weight. Was that sort of the case at 223? And is it true that maybe the UFC even mentioned that, hey, if for whatever reason Max Holloway can't fight, you might be the next guy in line, or at least in consideration to sort of replace him? Is that true?
Yeah. I mean, Rick had been saying, especially for this card, just because, as we've seen, Khabib and Ferguson is plagued with, there's, who knows, that's got some voodoo magic surrounding that matchup, you know what I mean? So it was something that we talked about in this camp, like, hey, let's get you down to 55.5 the night before. Usually I make weight the night before weigh-ins. So, going, as we had our last few training sessions before we left for New York, that was kind of the conversation, like, hey, just see, in 1 pound is a big difference. For some people that are like, oh, 1 extra pound is not a big deal. Yeah, well, when you're big for your weight class, 1 pound is huge. Yeah. So, but we had discussed it, you know what I mean? Like, we're going to get down to 55.5 the night before, and we're going to wake up on championship weight, just in case, you know what I mean? And, that's not a bad habit to have to make championship weight.
And I mean, there's a little bit of controversy from people about who the actual champion of the division is. I mean, you got Conor McGregor, who got stripped of his title, but many people still kind of see him as the champion. You've got Tony Ferguson, who was the interim champ, but now he's out with an injury. And you've got Khabib, who fought Al Quinta for the title, but it wasn't exactly a performance that a lot of people thought maybe makes him the definitive champion. And also, it wasn't against, a top-ranked guy in the division to win the title. So when you're sort of thinking about who the champion is, who to yourself, who do you think is the champion?
First and foremost, all 3 guys are elite, world-class fighters. Yeah. Let's just get that out. Let's get that out there right away before I answer. All 3 guys are world-class. All 3 guys are elite, top of the heap for sure. But in my eyes, Tony Ferguson's the champion. His win streak has a lot of prestigious names to it. He beat Kevin, he beat Rafael dos Anjos, he beat Edson Barboza. He's got that long laundry list of guys. His win streak. I mean, what's his win streak? 10 fight win streak or 11?
Yep, 10.
Dude, that's unprecedented. You know what I mean? So I look at Tony as the champion, but I'm not taking anything away from Khabib. He's got 25-0, 26-0 record altogether. So his win streak's insane. But I look at Tony as the champion. You know what I mean? Now, if Khabib and Tony fight, who knows how that fight goes? But just in my eyes, I think Tony's the champion.
Does that change sort of for you as far as who you would like to face, for the title when, you eventually do fight for the belt? Obviously, Tony Ferguson, who you see as a legitimate champion. Or let's say, for example, Conor McGregor ends up coming back and winning the belt. Would there be sort of more, want for you to sort of fight him, especially, given UFC 223?
Actually, of all the guys, I'd rather fight Tony. Because Tony and I were supposed to fight, you know what I mean? Tony and I were supposed to fight in 2016, and that never came to fruition. And I look at Tony as the toughest matchup for me. And with that being said, I think him being the toughest matchup for me will bring out the best in me. You know what I mean? I'm the type of guy where I feel like if you throw me in against the guy that's going to be, the guy that's my hardest matchup, I think that's going to bring out the best in me. And I know that the best in me can beat anybody on any given day to become a world champion. So, Tony's the fight that I like for myself.
And it's interesting because the division has so many interesting matchups. Obviously, Dustin Poirier had that great performance against Justin Gaethje, and that kind of elevated him to a lot of people saying, hey, this guy might actually have a shot of getting the next title shot. Now he's fighting Eddie Alvarez. They've put that fight back together. What do you think about that fight being put together and made again?
Hey, I think it's a good fight. Here's the thing, we don't know what's going on with Khabib. He's got Ramadan, and, obviously there's negotiations to be had, potentially with Conor. So would it have been a good move on Poirier's part to sit and maybe see if he gets the title fight? Yeah, that's not a bad idea. I think that they would have put Poirier in there before they would have put Alvarez in there. But, there's a storyline there between the guys. They have some unfinished business. So, it's a good fight to make. It's a good fight to make for the division. The one thing I like about what's going on is the landscape of the lightweight division is really finally getting some movement. This goes all the way back to the UFC Detroit card. You know what I mean? We've had the number 1 and number 2 guy matched up. It was supposed to be Khabib and Tony. Then we had Barbosa and Kevin matched up. We had Alvarez and Gaethje matched up, and all these matchups were just like really good pivotal matchups for ranked guys. So there's just a lot of good movement right now. So Poirier and Alvarez fighting is good for the division. It's going to keep things moving, keep the rankings shuffling around. Keep the top 5 really interesting. So that's the one thing I've really been enjoying the last 6 months is all the movement in my division.
Yeah. So do you sort of see those guys as sort of like the next logical guys potentially for the next title shot? Or what would you think if sort of McGregor came back in the mix and sort of went straight into a title shot against Khabib?
It's hard to say. He did beat Eddie Alvarez, who was the champion at the time, before he was stripped of his title. Who knows? You know what I mean? That's up to the brass, but it doesn't hurt Alvarez or Poirier it doesn't hurt either of those guys to go out and kick some ass in July and try to submit yourself to jump ahead in line. Either way, whoever wins between Poirier and Alvarez in July should just sit and get the next. That should be the next fight. I mean, I don't see Tony coming back anytime soon.
Yeah.
I think that injury really is going to require a lot of healing. So whoever wins out of Alvarez and Poirier, I think should sit and wait for a title fight.
And I guess the thing is, you versus Pettis, it's a huge fight as well in the division. What do you think is up for grabs for the winner of that fight? Obviously, Pettis is a huge name, and with a big performance over that, it really raises your profile even more in the division. But in terms of what's next, where do you think it sets you up in the division in terms of rankings and who you should be fighting next as well?
That's tough to say. Somebody actually asked me that today, and I haven't really thought that far ahead, and nor do I really want to. I'm focused on the one big goal at the end, and that's the belt. I mean, I'm here to be a world champion. When the day comes that I'm not chasing a gold strap, and I don't belong in the UFC, but that's the only thing I'm focusing on. I know that a win over Anthony Pettis gets me closer to a title fight, gets me closer to becoming world champion. I haven't really thought about the matchup that comes next. You know what I mean? I'm really focused on the task at hand. Especially now, since we've had the fight, since we've had to make this fight, a second time. I'm just focused on Anthony. I'm not focused on who could potentially be next or anything like that. The focus is Anthony, and the only thing I know is when I win, it's going to get me closer to what I'm destined for.
Yeah, I know. Obviously, you focus on Pettis, and you've sort of conveyed last time to us how you're never short on motivation. But what is it like sort of doing the same training camp back to back for the same opponent? It's a little bit weird. I imagine a lot of it will be drilling the same things that you already kind of learned and maybe even mastered in the last camp. So is it sort of easier sort of doing the same thing because you know what you're doing, or is it a bit more tedious kind of going like, oh man, I already did this and now I've got to do it again?
No, it's easy. Here's the thing. When I train for a fight, I train to get better all around as a fighter. I don't cater my training camps around who I'm fighting. I cater them around myself. I try to just broaden my skill set as a whole. You know what I mean? It's like if you have a whole training camp game planning for your opponent to do a certain set of moves or things and they don't do it, it fucks you up on fight night. It's like, I trained for this guy to do this, he's not doing it. Now my whole game plan's shot. I'm not into that. So it's not a tedious training camp. I'm just continuing what I was doing before, and that's just getting better all around. Stand-up, jiu-jitsu, wrestling, my conditioning, my strength, and it's all catered to me. It's not catered to somebody else. You know what I mean? I've never been the type of guy to not formulating my camps around who I'm fighting. I'm trying to get better in my deficits.
And do you think the silver lining here is, I mean, you spoke about the glass half full, glass half empty. Do you think the silver lining here is being a part of UFC 226? Because it's a big marquee card. The whole world's going to be watching that card. Does it feel good for this fight to sort of be rebooked for such a good event?
Dude, absolutely. I'm fighting in Las Vegas. It's like here's a couple facts. I've never lost when I fought in Las Vegas. I've never lost when I've trained in Las Vegas. And I've never lost when I'm on the same card as DC, my man. So there is a lot of silver lining to this. It's I may reside in Spokane, Washington, but my second home is Las Vegas. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of silver lining to it. I don't gotta go travel and acclimate to the East Coast or whatever coast or whatever country. I'm here. I'm training here. I'm fighting here. And it benefits me.
Do you know where this fight will fall in terms of the card? Is it going to be main card? Is it going to be prelims? And do you have a preference?
To my understanding, it's on the main card. And,
nice.
I've always liked being the main prelim on FS1. You get your own commercial. You get a lot of publicity. You know what I mean? Mainly like the commercial on FS1. It's kind of cool to see. And another thing is when you're the last prelim, you know exactly when you're going to fight. So it makes it easy for your warm-up and stuff. Sometimes if you're like halfway in the middle of a card, like a fight can go short, a fight can go long, and you warm up, and then all of a sudden you're sitting for a while, or all of a sudden fights end short, you're having to rush your warm-up. So sometimes it's nice to be the last prelim because you know when you're going to fight. You know what I mean? But to my understanding, it's going to be on the main card. I'm cool with that.
Yeah. Look, Michael, we really appreciate your time. We know you're in the tub. We don't want to be too greedy with us. As we let you go, what is the official prediction? Does it change at all, given that it's, the new location, new event? How do you see yourself getting it done against Anthony Pettis at UFC 226?
As always, the game plan is punch, wrestle, choke, and get my hand raised.
Well, it's going to be exciting, guys.
Vegemite sandwiches to celebrate, right?
Oh, yeah, dude. Vegemite sandwiches and an ice cold Zima. Let's do this.
Well, guys, it's going to be exciting. UFC 226 just got a little bit more packed and a little bit more exciting. Make sure to follow Michael on Twitter and Instagram at MikeMav22. Michael, thank you so much for joining us from the hot tub. It's been a lot of fun. Best of luck for the fight. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Hey, this is Tony Okagui Ferguson, and you guys listen to Submission Radio. Keep tuning in, guys.
All right, guys, our next guest is like a fine wine, a fine cheese. He just gets better with age, and he joins us here not long after his birthday and a wedding, which wasn't his. I'm not sure if he crashed it or not. We have to find that information out. Of course, the pride of Ireland, Sean Sheehan. Welcome to Submission Radio. Of course, you know him from his great work on Severe MMA, Sherdog.com. His fact of the day, which is very, very, you call it useless, but to us, there's a lot of merit to it. There's a lot of merit to it for us with it sometimes, Sean. It's great to have you on the show. Happy birthday. Is it 21 or 22?
22 again. I was 30 on Sunday. God almighty, the oldest person in the world. I'm feeling. I'm still hungover from Sunday. So what day have we today? It's now Wednesday in Ireland. So I'm still hungover, and it was just. I'm too old now. I can't do it anymore. But yeah, I just said I was at a wedding. One of my best friends got married at the weekend, so it was a good weekend to have it on. I missed the fights and stuff because of it, but I've caught up on them since. But it was worth it. It was.
That's pretty crazy though, because there's so much stuff happening in your neck of the woods. What did it feel like to sort of not be a part of the action as it was happening? Were you checking things on your phone while the ceremony was taking place? Was there a fight that happened and the priest asked, does anybody object? And then you stand up and you saw the Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, Darren Till decision. You go, I object. Excuse me.
Well, it was actually, here it was Sunday, the card was on, so it's like they do 2-day weddings in Ireland now, so it was the second day of the wedding. But the first day of the wedding, during the speeches and the meeting, all the Champions League final was on. Obviously in Ireland, most people support the English team, so you know, a lot, probably like 30% of the guys there supported Liverpool, so they're all like on their phones, like watching the match in the middle of the speeches, and like yes, and then oh no, what's going on? Like leaving and going for brandy and stuff in the middle of the speeches and stuff. But yeah, the next day I was there, and it was funny because I was in this really, it was in this kind of, you know, old man Irish kind of pub, but it's actually a nice pub. But I was trying to watch on my phone, and the internet was so bad in there. I was like in a little corner. But I could get Twitter, but I couldn't get a stream. So I was watching. It was like the 4th round, going into it, and I just saw on my phone, Wonderboy has been dropped. It was at the end of the 4th round, start of the 5th round, and next thing they like brought a cake out for me, and they were all started singing Happy Birthday, and I was like,
oh my god.
So I just like threw my phone. I was like, yeah, thanks, love the cake. Oh yeah,
that's so fun.
I remember that one anyway. So.
And just with the wedding, were you more of an Owen Wilson or a Vince Vaughn at this wedding? We're picturing like wedding crashes. Did you dance with somebody's daughter and then like the father got like upset and he was keeping a keen eye on you and you're like, damn, I knew I shouldn't have danced so good. Now I've upset him.
I was dancing with plenty of lads' daughters, and I don't think anyone got upset. No, there was a few fathers and daughters there. I think they were happy enough, you know, to see a beautiful single man like me dancing with their daughters.
Yeah.
What more could you ask for in a son? You know, so.
Lost a lot of good men. Covering MMA, let's talk about Bellator 200. Because before we get to UFC Liverpool, Bellator 200 seemed like it delivered. It was a fun card, a lot of big celebrities. How about that? Chris Pratt over there. That was pretty cool to see him cage started. Now he loves his MMA. What did you think of Gegard's sort of big win, his middleweight title win, and this sort of fight that's brewing between him and Rory McDonald?
Yeah, I thought it was a good win. I think Rafael Carvalho is a good fighter. I don't know if we talked about it last time I was on, but I talked about it on my own podcast. Anyway, I think people maybe, you know, because I'm sure you guys find it hard to see Bellator. We can't really watch Bellator here, although it was on this weekend. You know, you don't see that much of these guys. Even guys like, you know, Michael Chandler and stuff, and Eddie Alvarez when he went over to the UFC. People don't know how good these guys are, and I think it's the same with Carvalho. And for Mousasi to go in and take him out as quickly as he did, you know, Mousasi's well-rounded. He's good wrestling, good striking. He can do it all, and I wasn't surprised he won, but I was maybe surprised in the fashion he won. And on the Rory fight, I think that fight makes a lot of sense. I think they're probably two of the best guys in Bellator at the moment. Rory is a big welterweight. He's the champion there. Mousasi's the champion at middleweight. Let's have some fun. Let's do it. I like that fight a lot.
Do you reckon that's really like one of the most high-level fights Bellator's done, if they do it, in a very, very, very long time? I mean, you know, again, like you mentioned, no disrespect to any former Bellator fighters or current Bellator fighters, but you got two guys very, very high level in the UFC, and now they've gone over to Bellator. If they fight each other, I mean, that's a huge, huge matchup. I'm very curious, where do you think that would take place if they were going to do it? Do you reckon this would be like another big UK event?
I think Canada is the perfect place to do that. You know, that Canadian market is really strong. Like, Canada, I think, is a little bit like Ireland in that they really get behind their own people. You know, we saw it with GSP, and I think the same would be it'd be the same with Rory if he was going for 2 belts. You know, imagine Rory's sitting on the cage with the 2 belts on his shoulder, like Conor McGregor did, obviously, but that was in over America, and it wasn't in Ireland. But imagine if McGregor could have done that in Ireland. You know, Bellator could have that opportunity to do the same thing with Rory McDonald in Canada. I think that makes perfect sense. You know, where else could you have the fight? You know, it'd be a big fight everywhere. People would buy tickets anywhere in the world to watch that fight. But I think Canada is the best place to do it. You know, I think it makes the most sense. Go to Montreal. You know, go to one of the big arenas in Canada and do it there. You know, it's that to me seems like a home run for Bellator.
It'll be interesting to see if they follow up that advice, because it would make a lot of sense. What about Michael Venom Page? I mean, he had that great moment in the Thanos glove. Chris Pratt was there. They were sort of laughing and getting along. It was a bit of a rub for him. He had another great performance. Where do you think he goes next? Who do you think he fights next?
Well, if Chris Pratt was there, he should have brought out little Sebastian into the cage with him. You know, give it a bit of a song for poor little Sebastian, R.I.P. But yeah, I think. I was actually talking about it with Graham on the podcast today, and I don't think he's going to get. I don't think he's going to get the title shot straight away, because we just talked about Rory going up and stuff. I don't think this Paul Daly fight is going to materialize for one reason or another. I hope it does. Benson Henderson, that's the fight. That's the fight to make. MVP needs to move up now. David Rickles is a good guy. We said it coming into this fight. He's a good guy. It's time. He's had enough schooling. He's had enough easy fights. He needs to move on. He needs to fight I'd be okay with Daly. I'd like Henderson. I'd be really okay with Rory McDonald. Make the Benson Henderson fight. I think that's the simplest fight to make. I think Benson Henderson doesn't turn down fights. I think MVP would have a great chance of winning that fight. And I just think that fight makes a lot of sense. You need to move him on. He's had enough time now, and this guy could be a star. I tweeted it after the fight. This guy could be the best welterweight in the world. He really could be. But we don't know if he is or not. Let's find out. Let's put him against Paul Daly. Let's put him against Benson Henderson. Let's put him against Rory McDonald. Let's see if he's the best welterweight in the world. Because maybe he is. We just don't know. We know he's really, really good. We know he absolutely destroyed David Rickles and he's destroyed other people. And he looks unbelievable, better every time he's doing it. So let's see if he can be the best.
Just quickly, before we move on, what did you think of Rickles' decision to sort of, give up, mid-fight and sort of call it off the way he did? Because I know a lot of people sort of, criticize him for it. I'm certainly not going to be the guy to take a dump on him. At the end of the day, if you're fighting a high-level fighter like Michael Venom Page and you feel like, there is just no way you're going to win and, you do have to preserve yourself at the end of the day, your own health, your own body. But yeah, what did you make of that moment?
Yeah, look, for me, I think people who cover the sport are not harsh enough on fighters. And when we are, people get very offended by it, and rightly so. If you're a supporter of a fighter, you should be protective or whatever. But at the weekend, I said David Rickles quit, and I didn't get one negative tweet back or anything. Everyone was agreeing. Nobody said anything, and I think it's because he did quit, and it's not that he quit and he gave up. It's that Michael Venom Page made him quit. It was actually a testament to what MVP did. It reminded me a little bit of Lomachenko. He just puts these guys, he bewilders them. They don't know what they're doing. And that's what MVP, I think, was doing to him. And he was taking too many shots. He was just getting sick of it. And in the end, he's like, what am I doing this for? This guy is picking me off. This guy is hurting me. It's time to get out here. Like, some people do it differently. It's very rare. See, it's odd we see it like that, where someone just basically gives up in the middle of the cage while they're standing, while they haven't been knocked down or something. We all know fights we've seen where a guy gets hit or a girl gets hit, and they go down and they turtle up and the fight's over, or they don't defend that armbar well enough or so. And it's not, I hear Chael Sonnen talk about a lot, and I know Chael is a bit weird though, but we see that happening. Someone, and it's not that they give up, it's not that they let them win. It's that the fight has gone out of them. We've seen it with Anthony Johnson a couple of times against Daniel Cormier. He beat the fight out of him and then he won. Like, the way those fights ended, they would never have ended before. And MVP did that, and he did it in a more kind of visceral way, in a more outward way, and like a shameful way to him. And it's something that MVP. He's a guy who likes to trash talk. He's a guy, who likes to build himself up. And this is something which was perfect for him. He can talk about this. He can go, I make guys quit with my striking. And, I think this is huge for him going forward if his matchmaking is right. Do you think it was smart of Rickles to do that before it ended up in, say, like a Raquel Pennington situation where she was just taking unnecessary damage, or like, say Josh Koscheck versus GSP, where, it wasn't necessarily a brutal fight, but by the end of it, after just rounds and rounds and rounds of taking damage, Koscheck was out for like, what was it, a year and a bit, and, his career was never the same. Yeah, I said with Pennington a couple of weeks ago that I think there's two things to consider. Do you have any chance of winning the fight on a scorecard, or do you have any chance of winning, getting a stoppage, getting a takedown, getting a submission, getting a knockout? And if the answer to both of those things is no, then I think it's the right decision to be pulled out. And I don't think he had. I don't think he was going to take him down and submit him. I don't think he was going to knock him out. I don't think he was going to win on the scorecards. And there's another thing as well, actually, is are you taking enough damage? It's grand for someone, to be 4 rounds down and go into the 5th round. If they're not that hurt, if to get to the end, I think it's okay for people to do that as well. But he was just getting hurt. He was just getting more and more hurt all the time. And I think it's smart. If more people did that, it would prolong a lot of careers, but it's not really the sport for doing that. These are the toughest people in the world, and for him to quit, and David Rickles is a really tough guy as well. We've seen him in there against some of the best in the world, Michael Chandler and more, and he's not a guy that quits, but MVP, he made him quit. No, it was crazy. Let's talk about UFC Liverpool, because you mentioned the birthday cake, the fact that sold the birthday cake because of this fight, the main event, Stephen Thompson versus Darren Till. No doubt about it. I mean, a fantastic night for Darren Till in the sense that the crowd was going absolutely mental. And it kind of showed the rest of the world that this guy is a big deal, in your neck of the woods.
over in Liverpool. But what did you think of the fight, and who did you have winning it?
Just in case anyone's wondering now, I'm not from Liverpool, and I hate Liverpool. And Liverpool is the worst place in the world. I'm a Manchester United fan, and I don't like Liverpool. But anyway, I thought Wonderboy won the fight. And, I mentioned it a couple of times. Like, this wasn't bad judging, but this wasn't good judging. And I think you can have something in between. I think if this fight was judged properly, I think it would have been either 4-1 or 3-2 to Wonderboy. I personally scored a 3-2 to Wonderboy. I thought Till won the second and the fifth, and Wonderboy won the first, third, and fourth. I thought the first four were I honestly, I thought every round was close. I thought the fifth was even close because it was a clubbing blow that knocked Wonderboy more than actual hurtful blow. I don't think he was close to being out at any stage, and I think he was kind of nipping the round before and after that. But that was the biggest blow of the fight. Of the fight and the round, and you have to give that to Till. The fourth, I thought, was the clearest for Wonderboy. I see a lot of people scoring that for Till. I just thought he was a little bit quicker. I thought he was countering very well. I think he was taking away the jab of Till in that round. In the first and the first and the third were kind of the close rounds, although I think the third was a pretty clear round for Wonderboy as well. The first was the dodgy one, but I just think Wonderboy's kicks to the body, kicks to the legs did enough. In the second round, I think the kicks to the legs as well were a big thing for Darren Till in that round. There was a couple of welts on Wonderboy's legs after that. Landed a few jabs, landed one or two big shots, and I think he won that round. But it was a tough round. The scores by no means a robbery in any way, but I think it was a fight that you need pinpoint accuracy to score, and I watched it very, very closely because I had heard that it was a close decision. And it's obviously the people Kate's are watching it very closely as well, but it's not that easy. When you see every time Darren Till throws a punch, it's like Conor McGregor knocking out Aldo, and even if he doesn't connect, Wonderboy could knock him down, and it'd be like not happening, to be silent. So it's just human nature for the judges to be a little bit swayed by that. There were so few punches in every round to decide it. If you're on the wrong side of the octagon as a judge and you don't see it and missed one big punch, that could be the whole round. That's changed because it was so few punches. But it was a close one, but I do think Wonderboy definitely won.
I mean, there's a little bit of a debate about this octagon control. Everybody always talks about octagon control. Mm-hmm. I mean, do you think judges pay too much attention to octagon control? Do you think this is one of the factors in this fight that sort of made them believe that Darren Till won over Wonderboy in a lot of cases?
No, I don't think so. Like, octagon control is a tertiary criteria. So it's the third criteria that you use. You use effective grappling and effective striking. And there was plenty of effective striking in this fight. Maybe it was only 10 punches around, but that's enough. It's more than octagon control. So if and octagon control is a funny thing as well, because I watch all those rounds and I see effective striking that won each and every one of the 5 rounds. From me, my point looking at it, there's other fights where it's totally even and maybe there isn't that much striking, and you can talk about your octagon control then or whatever. But for all of those rounds, I thought there wasn't a second I thought where octagon control won this for this guy. Octagon control is a very, very weird thing, and I was talking about it earlier on my own podcast. I think fight control would be a better word to use, or a better phrase to use, because when you're talking about octagon control, you're talking about where you're someone forcing this fight into one area. If you force a fight into an area which you're not as good as the other person in, are you really controlling the fight? Like, if you force the fight to the ground with Tony Ferguson and he's on the bottom and he triangles you, who has the octagon control there? Tony Ferguson has the octagon control because he wants to get you in a triangle. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson wants you coming at him and he wants to counter you. So for me, if that goes down to octagon control, Wonderboy wins that fight 5-0. If you want to look at it that way. But I don't think it comes down to octagon control there. And I think it's a very weird, like, octagon control is not going forward. It's just not. It's winning the fight where the fight takes place. And Wonderboy was doing that for the whole fight, basically. But it is not as simple as that. It's the effectiveness of those strikes. Till's strikes I thought were more effective in 2 of the rounds. Wonderboy's strikes I thought were more effective in 3 of the rounds, and it basically as simple as that. I think going to octagon control sometimes it's fine sometimes, but sometimes I think it's a bit of a cop out, and I don't think that, and I think it's from fans maybe who don't understand the scoring, and even media who don't really understand the scoring or haven't looked into it, haven't gone out and talked to judges or talked to different fighters and stuff. And I've tried to talk to, I have good friends that are one of the judges over here, and a couple more guys, and I tried to talk to them about it and understand it more, and I feel like I have a pretty good understanding of it now. People are always going to disagree, but I do think there's generally a misunderstanding of the actual rules of scoring these days, and octagon control is something which is probably the most misunderstood thing in all of MMA.
I think you should score fights, Sean. If you were running for some kind of judge, I would definitely vote for you. And I like what Ariel Helwani said about how, there needs to be more accountability, when judges do score fights. There's no real explanation as to why they judge the fight a certain way. It's based, or at least not publicly. It's essentially just like, all right, cool, fight's been judged. That's the end of that, and it gets buried sort of, much like the ending scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark. There's a box in a warehouse full of other boxes. We never hear about it ever again. And, decisions aren't really ever overturned. I would like to see a lot more clarity and transparency as to, why judges scored, things certain way. I'm with you as well. I do think Wonderboy won. I also think, I guess the silver lining would be that for a guy who I know you predicted, a lot of people expected Wonderboy to finish him in the late rounds, or at least take over in the late rounds. You could say in some ways, even though it wasn't the most exciting fight, Darren Till somewhat exceeded expectations. He even if it wasn't a clear dominant win, he sort of, he stood there with one of the best strikers in the UFC and certainly in the division. So I think that's somewhat of a win. But of course, there was the controversy. There was the botched weight cut. And yes, the Liverpool crowd was going nuts. But, how well will that translate if he goes and fights? If this fight was taking place in, say, New York and Vegas, what would the reaction be there? Then there's the fact that, no one's really expecting him to get the next title shot. But, in his title, future with this botched weight cut, how long will that hang over his head? So all in all, how much do you think this win sort of, does for Darren Till, even though it wasn't the poetic ending that, he and the UFC probably hoped for?
I think, in my mind anyway, it raises him into that upper echelon of fighters in the welterweight division now. Yeah. Well, maybe it might be the middleweight division, but for me, I talked to you guys last week, and, we talked about... For me, a big thing with guys coming into fights like this is their ability to translate from 3-round fighters to 5-round fighters. Yeah. And Darren Till, that was a huge question for him coming in here, because, the Cowboy Cerrone fight, we saw that fight where he knocked him out early in the main event. And against Wonderboy, I said it last week, I thought it would go second, third, fourth round to Wonderboy, but because I thought Till might come out and fight harder, but there's always that thing, and I mentioned it last week. It's like, how do you translate to become a 5-round fighter? And he did it very well. I thought he lost the fight, but I thought he fought very, very well. I thought Wonderboy fought well as well. It's so difficult. I don't think people understand how good Wonderboy is, and it's because he's that good that makes these fights work like that. It was the same with Tyron Woodley. These fights kind of become stalemates. They turn into very kind of odd fights that maybe a lot of people don't enjoy, but it's like, it's like two guys standing at the edge of a cliff fighting at all times, and someone's going to fall off at some stage. And
he did better than Rory McDonald. I think that's a huge feather in his cap, right?
Definitely did. Yeah. Rory in that fight though was, he was coming off of that nose injury and stuff as well, and I think Wonderboy was I think they're different fighters as well. I don't think Rory hits as hard as Till, and I think Wonderboy was a little bit more open in that fight to go at Rory, and that was the best performance of Wonderboy's careers, but Wonderboy's career by a mile. I don't think this necessarily was, but I still think it was a good display by him, and I think that damage that Wonderboy actually did to Rory, I think he hit him with maybe not as big a shots and not similar shots, but he hit him with good shots. He hit Till with good, and he walked through him. He didn't show any damage on his face or anything like that. And maybe if he did, maybe if his nose was bleeding and stuff, it would have made it a bit clearer. But yeah, I think he did do better than Rory. All right, and when you go in there and you're even close to beating Wonderboy, you're one of the top fighters in the world. Make no mistake about that. And Darren Till really is. For me, this elevated him. I wasn't sure about him before this, but now I am. I think he is one of those top few fighters in the world at the welterweight division.
Interesting. Yeah. And just for the record, I had Stephen Thompson winning as well, but obviously very impressed with what you mentioned, Sean, Till's ability to actually turn into that 5-round fighter and show constraint and strategy in the fight. And, the moment didn't take him. I know a lot of fighters, they'll fight in their hometown or the main event, and you'll see before the event, they'll be jumping up and down, doing all this stuff, and then the fight starts and they're exhausted. So he was very composed. It was very impressive. Dana White mentioned that he wants to take him stateside. He wants to take him to Las Vegas for his next fight. A lot of people sort of wondering who he fights next. Is it going to be a guy like Usman as his next fight? And also, obviously, a huge star in Liverpool. The metrics would be off the charts. The UFC would definitely be taking note of that. But when he goes on the road after this fight, do you believe that Liverpool crowd will follow him to Vegas? Do you think the US crowd will start sort of embracing him a little bit like they did with Conor McGregor? What do you see for him next in his next sort of UFC fight?
I'm unsure, to be honest. For me, I wrote an article for Sherdog and before this fight, and I talked about how stars have been built in Liverpool, and they've kind of been built with cage warriors, you know, and Molly McCann and Paddy Pimblett and stuff. I actually think Paddy Pimblett is the bigger star. Now, if you ask me, if Paddy Pimblett went in here and was signed by the UFC and won a big fight, headlining Liverpool card, and you ask me if he's gone to Las Vegas, will they follow him? I'd be saying this is Conor McGregor Part 2, not in ability or fighting or anything, but in the crowd. The crowd would follow him in huge numbers, I think. But with Darren Till, I'm not so sure. You know, he didn't take that route. You know, he lived in Brazil and he didn't come up through the cage warriors route. He didn't headline cards like Paddy Pimblett has in the last year or two, and like Molly McCann has done. So I'm not sure, to be honest. Maybe I think it is, and you know, this fight. I think I heard someone talking about it who was over there. I can't remember, but they were saying people are disappointed. You know, the first Liverpool card, this fight. You know, if you're a hardcore fan like us, I think you enjoyed the fight. But maybe if this is the first fight you've seen, if you're a McGregor, you're a fan. If you've only been watching for the last couple of years and you come in and you see this, maybe you don't understand the sport as well as other people. Maybe you think this is a little bit of a damn squib of an event and of a main event especially, and maybe that'll cause you to look. I was talking as well to a couple of people about, you know, McGregor coming up. You know, a lot of people are comparing Till to McGregor, and you know, you're asking if it's going to be a similar thing when he goes to Vegas. McGregor never made the missteps that Till made last week, I don't think. You know, he never missed weight, and he was similar to Till. You know, he's struggling to make that 170. McGregor struggling to make 145, but he made it. He got a main event in his hometown, and he knocked the guy out. You know, and it was a totally different opponent. You know, Diego Brandão nowhere near the quality of Wonder by Thompson, but maybe the matchmaker was different as well. And I never thought this was good matchmaking. I thought it should have been someone else. And I've said that for months. It was just, it was brilliant, but it was a little bit of a mishap. You know, if you wanted to build this perfectly, I think it was a bit of a mistake putting him in against Wonder by Thompson. It could have been great if he'd gone in, made weight, knocked him out and stuff. But, you know, it leaves a little bit of doubt. And it's very interesting to see how it'll play out over the next couple of months.
I also agree with you 100% that, yeah, if you want the hometown hero to get a big win, get a big signature win in Liverpool and leave everybody feeling happy, why would you pick Wonderboy? I think that was a massive mistake. But at the same time, the UFC, the way it played out, you wouldn't say that it played out perfectly for him with the botch weight cut and all that kind of controversy. But somewhere in the back, the UFC are popping champagne bottles. They don't have to deal with this, you know, Stephen Thompson conundrum of who does he face next. You know, he's a guy that's ranked #1. He just beat, you know, a guy that we're trying to promote. We don't want to give him a title shot again because he had those 2 fights with Tyron Woodley. You know, he's going to keep knocking off these like #1 contenders, and he's going to stay at the top of the division. Eventually, we're going to have to give him a title shot. So I think for the UFC, it worked out perfectly in their favor. What do you think is next for Wonderboy at this point? This was a very important fight for him to win, and he's kind of sort of, you know, been knocked down in the rankings at the moment. And, you know, a guy like him who wants that next title shot, he has to keep winning, otherwise, you know, they won't give it to him, and it kind of seems like that's what might happen now. I
think he should go to middleweight. He's a win over the middleweight champion, your boy Robert Whittaker. Go up to middleweight, get a couple of wins there, and he could be in for a title shot at middleweight very, very quickly. I think it makes sense for him. I think he's a big welterweight. You know, we know Darren Till, how big he is as welterweight, and he wasn't outsizing Wonderboy in there, I don't think. I think they're a similar enough size. I think Wonderboy cuts a lot to get to 170 as well. I think it makes sense. I know Chris Weidman is there, and he's his brother-in-law, and maybe that's a reason why he's not gone up there. But I think you have to kind of look after yourself as well. This is an important time in his career, and I think go. Even if he didn't get a title shot, if Weidman got a title shot, won the title or whatever, and there's fresh matchups there. There's plenty of matchups for him at middleweight. He's fought a lot of the guys at welterweight. There's still plenty of matchups for him at welterweight as well. But I think go up to middleweight, fresh coat of paint even, and he could get a title shot, I think, pretty quickly up there if it went right for him over next year.
I'll tell you what, just speaking on Wonderboy, how great of a guy is he for going over to Liverpool, fighting a guy like Darren Till, still taking the fight when he missed the weight, and then after he lost a very, very close fight where other fighters could, possibly be upset, he was smiling the whole time, he was shaking hands, he was a really good sport, and then afterwards, I know, he's doing some interviews as we speak across a bunch of media outlets, but for what I saw in the post-fight press conference, I mean, the guy is he's not, pointing any fingers. He's not, calling foul. This is a great guy. And this is a guy, by the way, just for the record, me and Casper get him on the show quite a bit. This is a guy that is like this behind the scenes with everyone. He's like this with us. I know he's like this with other media members. You can just text him. You don't even have to go through any managers or anything like that. And he will actually go out of his way to make time to speak to you. And when he speaks to you, he gives you a whole lot of time. He's really understanding with time differences and stuff like that. Unbelievable. This could be the nicest. Sean, this could be, if there was a belt for the nicest guy in MMA, which that would just be hilarious. Can you imagine that?
He's the ultimate babyface.
Yeah,
he's the ultimate
babyface. Demetrius Johnson of baby faces.
He really is. There's a reason why he's my favorite.
He's white meat babyface.
There's a reason why he's my favorite fighter. And I'm not a great one for favorite fighters. I've never really had to have favorite fighters, but I just love the way Wonderboy acts. I love the way he fights. I just, I really enjoy him. I think he's really great. And, that's the thing. I think a lot of people enjoy. I think Wonderboy was very close to being close to a breakout star for the UFC. If he'd won that title, the first title fight against Woodley. Now, I'm not saying a McGregor or a maybe not a GSP either, but I think he could have been the guy because he's a great style. People can understand how he fights. He, the clean cut American guy. I think that's something that could have worked, but it's kind of. It's kind of gone bad for him over the last couple of years and stuff. But he's definitely a nice guy, and you want to see a guy like him to succeed, even though we're a non-biased and all that.
But you want to see the UFC reward him, right? Because I know Dana White said, we'll look after Wonderboy. He did all this and that, but we've seen him say that so many times about so many fighters, and then where did you reward the guy? So I'd really like to see Wonderboy rewarded, especially. You mentioned it. I mean, he kind of missed his opportunity to be that breakout star. And you're looking at a guy in his mid-30s now. And this is a guy with a lot of injuries. I mean, this is a guy who's had a lot of thumb injuries, issues with his legs. So who knows how much longer he's going to be around for. You'd like to see him kind of rewarded with a nice fight next. I don't know if he's going to go up to middleweight or not, but if he's even staying at welterweight, you don't want him to sort of be thrown to the wolves again. You want him to be on a nice cut in a good position against someone that's going to be, I guess it's going to pay off for Wonderboy. So it would be nice for the UFC to sort of pay it back to Wonderboy. I don't think it's going to happen, but it would be nice to see them to do it. I mean, look after the guys that kind of look after you. So many, we've seen it time and time again. I think a lot of fighters in a position like that would have walked away. So it's good to see him going through, doing this fight, being cool afterwards. He's a great example for the UFC as well. I mean, with media sort of still criticizing MMA in general outside of America and a lot of different other countries, this is a great sort of spokesperson for your company. So you gotta stand behind you guys. It would be nice to see Dana sort of stand on his word with this and not kind of forget about him. Next card, it'll be some other new guy they'll be trying to look after once something.
Feed him Mike Perry. Feed him Mike Perry. That's what you do. Feed him Mike Perry, and he would get absolutely knocked out cold by Wonderboy. That's what would happen. So let's see that. Come on, UFC, do that.
Before we let, it'd be a fun fight. Before we let you go, Sean, got to ask you. Obviously, Michael Bisping retiring. That's a huge deal. A lot of people obviously have somewhat foreseen this. I know behind the scenes, a lot of people kind of were hoping that Michael Bisping retired. I personally had zero interest in this Rashad Evans fight. I thought most people it was a garbage fight, wouldn't do anything for any guy, regardless if they won. And, with Michael Bisping talking about how, and I think a lot of people don't realize that, his bad eye, we've heard a lot of people say that it's a lot worse than many people realize.
Yeah.
He's basically fighting. He's been fighting for many years now with one eye. for a long time, it's kind of brought up questions of how are commissions even sanctioning this? How is he even allowed to? Ended up winning the belt, and I think he put it really well that like he has nothing to prove anymore. You know, when it comes to this, I mean, he won the belt. There's no way he's ever going to climb the rankings up again. What is the point of it? Especially taking a fight like Rashad Evans? I mean, nobody cares. Are you I guess, satisfied and in some ways relieved to see Michael Bisping sort of making that decision finally to retire?
I am, but I'm skeptical. But this is MMA,
of course.
And this is a retirement. And there's about 2 people who've ever retired from MMA and never come back. You know, Cole Conrad and Carl Binder are the only 2 guys who've retired from MMA and not come back. You know, everyone else seems to come back at some stage. You know, the last time I was
the world hasn't ended. We might see Carl and Cole Conrad come back after all.
I'd watch that. Carl Binder's looking in good shape. He's still trending and stuff, so you never know. But no, I don't think so. He's pretty. I think Cole Conrad's into the white milk as well, so he's a great man. Cole Conrad is, well, you know, the best heavyweight of all time. But on Bisping, you know, if he is retired, if he does stay retired, and I think Ariel was saying as well, a few people were saying that, you know, they should have brought him into the octagon and stuff in Liverpool and done a big send off for him. Yeah, that would have been cool, but would have been cool if Bisping comes back in 6 months' time and fights again. You know, it'd be a bit weird. Remember Tito Ortiz at the time? You know, he had the big send off and all, and then like 6 months later he was back in. Now he's coming back to fight like Chuck Liddell again. You know, it's just it's one of those weird things that I think they're better off not doing it. But for Bisping, I think he was the ultimate overachiever in MMA. I think, you know, I don't think he was the most talented guy in the world. I don't think he's the most powerful guy in the world. I don't think he's the most athletic guy in the world. Yet he beat Anderson Silva. He won the title. He won tough. He fought GSP in a huge money fight. This guy has just achieved way more than he ever should have. And you look back at someone's career, and that's something you rarely see in any sport. And Bisping did it. You know, Bisping overachieved. And there was a period in his career that it wasn't looking like that was going to happen. And for a guy to do what he did in the twilight of his career, the way he did it, was just absolutely phenomenal, you know. And I think he turned a lot of people around as well. I think, you know, a lot of people, and I think Irish people, English people, Australians, you know, we were similar enough, kind of banter and stuff. And I you know, even the word cunts, which Darren Till said there last week. A lot of people, I saw a lot of American people that are offended by it. Like we say it all the time. Even, you know, small things like that. I think people didn't understand Bisping for years and years and years and hated him. And I think over maybe the last 3 or 4 years when he's gotten television and stuff as well, and we see him joking around, you know, he's always kind of joking with Karen Brighton, Dominic Cruz and stuff as well, especially. I think people, they kind of started to understand him and they started to like him. And I've always kind of understood and liked him as well, even though, you know, he's English and Irish and English people maybe are not the best friends in the world and stuff. But I think over the last few years, with his fighting, and with the way people think about him, it's just gone from here to here. And I think it's a good time to step out. You know, he took that big fight against GSP. He took one fight too many. I think we'd all agree with that, against Kelvin Gastelum.
Yeah, that shouldn't have happened, that fight. That shouldn't have been put together.
I give someone one fight too many, but 2 fights too many, I think, is too much. But and if every fighter in MMA only took one fight too many, it'd be a lot better of a sport. and you know, that they usually take 10 too many, and that's the problem. And hopefully Bisping goes out now and stays out now. And you know, he seems to have a good career and everything. And he had a great career in MMA, and I think it's a good time to step out if he does stay out.
No, there's a good sort of storybook ending to it if they sort of add him to the Hall of Fame induction this year and sort of make a big deal around him. And I hope that, you know, if he does choose to come back, I hope that they take some of the comments that he made on his podcast to sort of stop him from coming back, a little bit like what Mark Hunt said about his concussions and stuff in that interview. Bisping spoke about the fact that his good eye is now getting flashes and he's having issues with it as well. So hopefully that kind of stops them from giving him a license to fight in the future, because he'd hate a guy to go blind or severely damage his future for a few. And that's where he's headed. I mean, it's as much as a great of a job that he's done, just the fact that he was allowed to fight with that bung eye for such a long time is just, it's crazy. It just blows your mind. But it would be fantastic. And just quickly,
imagine going blind over what, a Rashad Evans fight. Nothing against Rashad, but it's like, oh man, like it's not even for the title. It's not even a super fight. Like, oh my God, imagine if that was the fight that did him in.
And I think with Bisping, he's such a great talker. You mentioned it, Sean. You know, he likes to talk a little bit of trash. He likes to have a bit of fun. This guy is an asset for the UFC outside of fighting. You know, this is a guy that you can put as in a commentating role for a bunch of events, analyst role. He could maybe even go to certain events and promote certain products for the UFC. He's got a great knack for sort of interviewing fighters in a more unprofessional way, where it's just more banter. This is a guy that the UFC can really sort of get stuff out of. I know when me and Casper spend time around him, he's just a master of building fights or building things. His fights he was great at building, but he could be just as good as talking about other guys and sort of building those guys and giving them the rub and all that kind of stuff. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with this ESPN deal, but I think the UFC will try and utilize him in the future. Hopefully he stays retired, guys. But yeah, Hall of Fame, he should get a nice send-off. That would be really, really cool. I think people would enjoy that, and then we could sort of celebrate his career. Definitely an underdog. And it'll be interesting to see what happens next. But with that, guys, we are out of time. Just want to quickly thank you, Sean, for coming onto the program. Post-birthday, post-wedding, Sean, if you had to sort of do a test right now and walk a straight line, we don't know if you could do it, but we appreciate you coming on the program and still being so sharp, even though I'm sure the alcohol levels are still high in the bloodstream. Thank you very much, Mr. Sheehan. And it's late at night over there as well, early in the morning.
And it's like we're in our 1 week of summer here as well, so I'm just pumping sweat. It's like 22 degrees here at midnight, and I can't take it at all. I can't take it. It's just too warm here. I don't understand how you guys do it all the time.
I'll tell you what. Yeah, right now it's freezing in Melbourne, but not by any standards that you guys have. But it's about 7 degrees, around 7-8 degrees, and we are dying down here. You know
the first time we it's like a perfect segue. Michael Bisping. The first time we interviewed Michael Bisping, Dennis was wearing this T-shirt. It was 2014. It was a hot day in Sydney, and everybody, all the comments in the YouTube section were about how Dennis had these pit stains. So I think that highlights how, quote unquote, well we handle the heat here in Australia. Not always so well, Sean.
I'm wearing
there were
navy for a
memes
reason.
Memes made. I considered quitting the profession and went to go into a sweaty hiding in the corner of a room somewhere.
Someone wrote you a diet in the comments section.
Someone wrote me a diet.
A lifestyle
they were
change.
legitimately afraid of
take one of them.
Yeah. So now I just wear a black T-shirt, and it does still. I'm sure after this episode, people will find it and start posting it on social media. So
the good thing is you can join the Diaz crew because you're always wearing a black T-shirt. You can just fit right in there, just slot right in. Black T-shirt, you're in.
Yeah, that's right. I think and I'm good at throwing coffee, so maybe Jake Fields could talk to the guys, get me in there. But guys, make sure to follow Sean on Twitter at Sean Sheehan BA. Of course, a lot of extra podcasting coming your way. UFC 225 around the corner, so make sure to check out all that extra podcasting. Make sure to join up, and of course check out the usual Severe MMA podcast, which is excellent. Make sure to support Sean and check out all his articles on sherdog.com. Give him a follow on Twitter at Sean Sheehan BA. And a big thank you to Michael Chiesa, John Gooden, and Megan Anderson for coming onto the program. It's an exciting time for MMA. Really pumped for UFC 225, guys. Thanks for joining the show. More Submission Radio next week. Have a great week.